I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome to the show. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock on this rather dismal Friday. I don't know what it's like where you are. I certainly woke up, sprang out of bed, thinking it was spring, and was put back in my place by the weather. Gosh, when is it going to have some sunshine? That's what I want to know. I think we're all fed up now with winter dragging on and on. We're all fed up with the government, with the economy, with the state of the country at large. So let's all get together for the next 3 hours for some communal catharsis, shall we? If you want to join that and have some free therapy on us, the number to call to get on the psychologist's couch this morning is 03444991000. And unlike other certain phone lines where you might phone up a lady for some nice company, we don't charge you extortionate rates. That's right, it's the same as your standard network rate. It's basically free, therefore. You can use that number to also send me a WhatsApp, 03444991000, or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp that I can play out on the show. You can text me 87222 if you are going to take the rather more old-fashioned option of SMS. Then you do need to write the word talk before your message, because otherwise it gets lost in the multitude of other studios we have here in Talk Towers. I'm on X at talkTV, and we've got lots coming up for you today. Let's kick off now with one of my favourite commentators, Benedict Spencer, to have a grouch-a-thon. Good morning, Benedict.
Good morning, Alex. How are you?
Well, as you can tell, I've got a bee in my bonnet this morning. And I tell you why. I thought it would be a good idea yesterday for, not a joke, but I thought, you know what would be really interesting to do? I'm going to assemble together all of the cases of ridiculous reasons why people have not been deported. So I just Googled deportation and looked at the news from 2025 alone. And my goodness, I found ridiculous amounts of vacuous, spurious reasons why we've got criminals and rapists and paedophiles and illegals all staying here. So that put me in a really bad mood yesterday. Then I wake up and I'm flicking through all the news, lying in my bed with a nice cup of tea, preparing for the show. And it's put me in an even worse mood. And I'm going to start off with this story. It doesn't surprise me at all. Apparently the French, when they're seeing boats going to leave Calais to come here, not only are they concerned for the migrants' safety so much, they say, oh, do you know what? You might want to lighten the capacity of the boat a bit. Why don't 20 of you get off and wait for the next one? There you go, you're safe now. And when you get to the halfway point, just wait an hour. Be patient, wait an hour, don't you worry. The Brits are going to be there to pick you up. I mean, zut alors.
We've known this, though, haven't we, for some time about the French and their slightly, shall we say, what's the expression? Avant-garde approach to border security when it comes to the
Laissez-faire might be more appropriate.
I actually think avant-garde might be a good way of describing it, but yes, laissez-faire is probably slightly more accurate. But it's certainly a lot less draconian than it is when it comes to them policing at their own southern border with Italy or Spain, for instance. It's one of those very frustrating things where, you sort of juxtapose it with the suggestions from this government that they're getting tough on illegal migration across the Channel and that they're going to put extra resources into renaming a border command thing and that what we need is more cooperation with the French. And you just think, but actually it's not in their interests. And that's ultimately what this all boils down to. There's no sense of sort of solidarity or anything like that. It's not in France's interest to stop these people leaving because they don't want them just as much as we don't want them. So that's why you can't really have this system where you just assume the goodwill of your neighbors. You have to take matters into your own hands. You have to be very pragmatic about deporting people and stopping people coming in the first place. If you find yourself relying on France, I'm sorry to say you're always going to be disappointed.
Right. And this is the point. The Mayor of Calais at one point said the problem is it's like El Dorado for migrants over in Britain. They all want to come to you because you just put them up in five-star hotels, you give them cars, driving lessons, playstations, yoga courses, tickets to sporting events. I mean, blimmin' heck, even I want to go to the other side of the Channel and re-enter via dinghy at this point. It sounds like a lovely life. And this is the point. When they've spoken to, we've got an article here in The Sun where they've gone and spoken to migrants about why they want to come to Britain. And they basically say, it's because you're so nice. You treat us so well. I mean, France does have a point. France might not be able to prevent the number of people traipsing over and lining up along the coastline of Calais wanting to come to Britain because they've heard we're a soft touch. And so instead of going, well, we're going to house you all here in Calais, they're going, all right, then get on the boat. If you want it so much, we're not going to get in your way. You can't really blame them.
Excuse me. This is the thing, though, isn't it? And it sort of belies logic of how things are currently going in the UK, that we continue to be actually so welcoming to people who have no real business being here. And it's an open secret the majority of these people are not refugees. They never have been. We had this back in Blair's day. Even that Labour government was prepared to say, that the people sort of coming, as it was then, on the backs of lorries and inside trucks and things like that, were just trying to play the system. And now we just have it on an industrial scale. And yet, as you say, we sort of bend over backwards. We provide all sorts of things that 99% of countries in the world simply do not bother to provide. And I think it comes down to, this is the irony, because of course then we're told by many people in this country that Britain is a horrible racist place and that we all have to sort of change everything about ourselves and sort of flagellate ourselves for the evils of empire. Actually, this speaks to the fact that Britain fundamentally is a very welcoming place, a very tolerant place, and that even when people see, members of the public see people, pulling the wool over the eyes of the authorities, if you like, they don't say anything because they don't want to be rude. They don't want to be offensive. They don't want to get caught up in other people's business. And it's a very strange thing that one of perhaps the biggest strengths of the British character has effectively been weaponized against them, in that they don't want to be rude or they don't want to pry into people's business. That is being used en masse by thousands of people and by the state that facilitates this to effectively allow us to get to this position where we do have millions of people in this country now who realistically probably shouldn't be.
Right, exactly. And it is now probably nudging up over millions. I had a security briefing. I can't really go into who from or go into details of what it involved. But again, that put me in not just an angry mood, but in quite a terrified mood, because what they told me was the number of people who were coming into the country on those small boats with connections to terrorist organisations and also criminal organisations. And we know this for a fact. When I was going through, making my sort of roll call of people who have not been deported, the vast number of people from organised crime, mafia bosses and so on and so forth, and the human traffickers themselves seem to be from Albania. We're supposed to be deporting a load of hardened Albanian criminals back to Albania. So far, we've only deported 8 at the cost of £500,000 each, £500,000 each. And we gave Albania a load of money to upgrade their prison system so we could send these people home. And then guess what? They're not going home because of things like chicken nuggets and I'm a male role model to some random teenage boy that my supposed girlfriend gave birth to 14 years ago. It makes a mockery of the entire system. But the problem is these people are dangerous. We have let in people who are training terrorists in this country. We've let in people who are consolidating the criminal underworld. When I walk down my street in London and I see shoplifting on an industrial scale, I know this is being run by crime gangs from the Balkans. And I don't understand, after all this time, why no government is able or willing to take the measure to say this now poses severe security threats to Britain. And therefore, we can take whatever action we like, because when it comes to defending this nation's security, people's lives, people's earnings, people's businesses, people's right to property, that trumps everything.
Yeah, I think that there is an institutional squeamishness at the heart of Britain. There's a squeamishness about confronting reality, about difficult decisions, about hard truths. And we see this not just when it comes to the migration issue. We see it when it comes to the energy issue, when it comes to defence, when it comes to things like how are we going to pay for the elderly or social care or the NHS in this country. We are almost allergic to the truth. We're not able, our political elites, our media elites are not able, not prepared to have honest conversations about these things. And that stems, I'm afraid to say, from a fear that there will be a backlash from the general public, that the general public won't like what it has, what it hears, and will punish people for telling the truth. And, you know, to be fair, we're seeing this now with Rachel Reeves' latest financial announcements when it comes to decisions that are being taken on things like independence payments and benefits, basically. What you get is, even though an awful lot of people in this country are very much sort of sotto voce going, yes, I'm actually in favour of cutting a lot of these things. My living standards are going down. The value of the pound is going down, but my taxes are going up, and I don't see much in the way of improvement in services. The loudest voices complaining about this are people saying, oh, but it's dreadful. It's dreadful that I'm not getting money, that this person isn't getting free money, that these people aren't getting free money. It's heartless. It's cruel. Nobody sat there going, guys, you can't afford it.
Right, and this is the thing. I mean, now apparently a quarter of Britons are disabled. A quarter, right? Yeah. And I'm sorry, but there must be a lot of people out there who very much deserve welfare. I'm not saying that there aren't plenty of people listening to the show right now, you know, might be tempted to message me and say, you've got no idea what it's like. I am so worried about what's going to happen to me, my care, or someone I care for, because the carers allowance is being cut, because PIP payments are being restricted, and I've got genuine need. And that is disgusting to me when you add up how much we're spending on these people breaking into our country on boats, 10 to 15 billion pounds. We could basically, if we got rid of that and just sent them all to mass deportation camps straight away, pay farmers whatever they need and not make them pay inheritance tax. We could keep all the carers allowances in place. We could keep the winter fuel allowance in place, because you add all of those things up and it's about 10 billion pounds, and we're spending a good 15 billion on people breaking into the country, giving them hotels. But at the same time, when you look at these statistics, with 2 million more people now than before the pandemic saying they can't function because of poor mental health. I have poor mental health when I open the newspapers every day and I roll into work. I'm sorry, it cannot be the case that 2 million people in a country of supposedly around 70 million, we're talking about 1 in 35 people, are just, they're too sad to work. I don't get it. If someone's genuinely got PTSD, if someone's genuinely got schizophrenia, if someone's genuinely, you know, I believe in things like compassionate leave when someone's had a bereavement in the family. But 2 million people not able to work because they profess to being, anxious or something? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it always amuses me, incidentally, that that we're now saying that it's approximate. It's about 23% of the population, they say, has a mental illness. And it's very amusing to me because it almost directly mirrors the proportion of the electorate that voted Labour at the last general election. So I think the mystery has been solved right there. That many people voted for something, expect something different. Well, if that's not a mental illness, I don't know what is. But it's one of those things where, again, we're not prepared to have the difficult but necessary, truthful conversation about this, where it's come from and how it is you will leave the thing. Because as you say, there are going to be a lot of people within that who are under severe mental strain. And we know that actually the pandemic and the policies put in place by the government did cause an awful lot of strain to an awful lot of people. But how it is that you get yourself from A to B, get yourself out of that sort of mental spiral into a positive, better, productive place is actually quite straightforward, and it involves lots of things around resilience. The answer is not, in fact, to prescribe people antidepressants for their whole life and then say, well, you can't work, you're sick, so here's some free money. That's never going to solve anything. But we're not prepared to have those conversations because, again, we are fearful about upsetting people, about being perceived as being rude, about being intolerant, about being heartless. And again, when society is functioning, that trait of the British people to be tolerant, understanding, trustful is a wonderful thing. When it's not, it means that people turn a blind eye to things that they need to be tackling directly.
But this is it. Society isn't functioning, which is probably why 2 million people say that they're balmy. It's not difficult to trace back to why people are getting depressed at large, why most Brits wake up every day and go, oh, God, another day in this blimmin' country. We no longer live in a high-trust society. I can't tell you how much my mood is altered when I walk to the tube and see a lot of ne'er-do-wells loitering around outside shops, leering, nicking things out of the co-op. We're also in a very self-indulgent society where during the pandemic, this whole stay at home, we're going to give you loads of money for not working, has fundamentally scrapped people's ability to be resilient. Similar with the working from home policy. It's become so normalised to not go to work and be with other people that people now see it as a human right to sit at home under their slankets. We've tanked the economy through egregious policies for the best part of 2 decades, whether it's energy policy, no policy to enable manufacturing, being part of that ridiculous trading bloc across the channel we're supposed to have nominally left. And we've got no free speech. When people want to moan about what's going on, they feel like they can't. They're smacked down because they can't let off steam in the pub. And their communities have been destroyed by mass immigration. So where once upon a time, even if life was a bit rubbish, they could go down the road to the Dog and Duck and talk about it, the Dog and Duck's probably got boarded up windows or has become a Polski sklep or a mosque.
You're hitting a lot of the nails on the head there, and I think things like deindustrialization and a lot of this actually comes down to free market policies as well. The fact that actually a lot of farmers have been undercut over the years, a lot of agricultural work in this country has gone. We often forget about that part of the fact that half of the country lives in the countryside. I know Labour has forgotten about it because they thought it'd be a wonderful idea to tax those people to the hilt. Those are the true working people left in this country. If you want to find where they are, it tends to be in the countryside, but their industry has been absolutely hammered as well. And all the associated industries with that. And again, at its core, difficult conversations about what it is functionally to be human. People need purpose. They need pride. They need resources. And instead, we have a country that goes, well, it'll be fine. We'll base everything on the services industry and we'll outsource that to the rest of the world. We don't need to manufacture anything. We don't need to grow anything. Energy, electricity, petrol, oh, don't worry about that. There's a green revolution coming. Haven't you heard? And yes, it'll cost you a lot more money, but doesn't it feel good to be doing something for the planet? Even as the rest of the world, having trodden down that path a little bit, goes, oh, do you know what, actually, maybe this isn't the best idea we've ever had. And Britain, of course, alone in this sort of island of oil and gas and coal on which it's built, has decided, actually, we don't need to do that anymore. Pushing up prices, as you say, making businesses less competitive, making it less possible for people to get jobs, to start their own businesses. They have to pay even more money. That's sort of at the heart of all of this, if you want to sort of drill down into what's going wrong. And again, difficult conversations. Kemi Badenoch, I'm not a fan of Kemi Badenoch, but she was at the very least right to say that the race to net zero is a fantasy and it's not really possible, given that Britain wants to get growth going again. She hasn't come out with any viable solutions, alternatives that I've heard yet. I understand why. But still, it was a start to have a major party leader of the two major parties actually saying, guys, this is nuts.
No, exactly. I couldn't agree more. Benedict Spence, thank you ever so much. It's always great catching up with you. OK, we're going to take a short break now. Don't go anywhere. There's so much more coming up, and I want to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about today. 03444991000 is the number to dial. Go on. Type that number into your phone and try and cheer me up, would you? And if you've not called before, then especially you if you've not called before, you can use that number to send me a WhatsApp as well. 03444991000. Text me 87222. Right, talk before your message. I'm back after this.
There are structural problems with this economy that go way back. Productivity flattened in about 2000, real wage and per capita GDP in the mid-noughties. I do think it's important to say whenever we talk about GDP growth, the thing that matters in terms of making you, me, or any of the viewers actually better off is per capita GDP, which is dividing GDP by the number of people here. If you've got flat GDP at the same time as you have mass immigration, that's a really incredible achievement, because that means your country is actually getting poorer in per capita terms. So that's worth noting. But no, of course, Labour doesn't have a plan for growth. Productivity flattened in about 2000, real wage and per capita GDP in the mid-noughties. I do think it's important to say whenever we talk about GDP growth, the thing that matters in terms of making you, me, or any of the viewers actually better off is per capita GDP, which is dividing GDP by the number.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, OK, I'm going to read out some of your messages. We've got a lovely little voice note to play, and if you want to get in touch, number is 03444991000. Are you fed up like I am with the amount of people who are not being deported for spurious reasons? Are you fed up that the French cops basically say, oh, don't overcrowd the boats, get halfway across the channel, just you wait there, the Brits are going to pick you up? Are you fed up that our total bill for these people breaking into the country is between at least 10 and 15 billion pounds per annum. And actually, if we didn't pay that money could be used to, I don't know, not tax the heck out of farmers, not cut the carers allowance, not cut the winter fuel allowance. That's right. Instead of paying for driving lessons and luxury hotels for our new friends who have broken into the country, we could be looking after our pensioners and people who basically only get a pittance as it is to look after relatives and try and give them some dignity. If you're as angry as I am, join in for some communal catharsis. Someone's just messaged going, I hate the leering too, Alex. When they're loitering outside shops, I keep crossing the road back and forth to avoid close encounters. I noticed myself doing this the other day. I got off the tube at Green Park, and there were a load of weird-looking ne'er-do-wells hanging around. And as I walked up the street, I kept sort of looking over my shoulder. I kept looking in my reflection in office windows as I passed to see who it was walking behind me, aware of the footsteps, aware of someone's presence tracking me down the street. Because as a woman in this day and age, that is how we're forced to live. You don't get that if you're a man, do you? You don't know what it's like, even at 2 in the afternoon in central London, to walk in terror, to not know where the heck you're going. You want to get your phone out on Google Maps because you can't find which street the restaurant's on because you're not, I don't know, you haven't done the knowledge as an exam. And the minute you get out your phone, you know some little scrote on a bicycle is going to come and try and grab it off you. Is going to target you, probably because you're a woman walking by yourself. Oh yeah, you want to put on some makeup, brush your hair, look pretty because you're going on a date. Don't bother, because if you leave the house in anything other than a burqa, the likelihood is someone's going to be all up in your grill going, aren't you beautiful? Yes, yes, talk to me. Aren't you lovely? I'm fed up of it. I'm absolutely done with it. And no one cares. No one listens. Oh no, you're a racist, you're a xenophobe. Don't you talk about that. All these lovely people, the traumatic countries they've come from. Oh, you know, it's really bad in those countries. They actually stone women to death. They better come here and have our protection. Get real. Hi, Alex, says Ian. There's no political will to stop illegal and legal migration. Right, there's not. This could be stopped immediately, but the government and the civil service won't do anything about it. We are, England especially, one of the most densely populated countries in the world. It's not just the criminal element, but our whole British culture is being undermined, especially by the Middle Eastern and Muslim cultures that are taking over areas in our country. Why are they building a girt mosque up in the Lake District, for crying out loud? Land of people like Wordsworth, and they're going to build some sort of, you know, new Mecca, some homage to Allah. Why? It's not like in the Middle East they're, you know, falling over themselves to make sure we got churches. Oh no, in Syria they're slaughtering Christians, but the mainstream media won't tell you about that because it doesn't fit the agenda, does it? Despite the fact that Christians are the most persecuted people, the most persecuted religion on the planet. They've been driven out of every single country in the Middle East. They're regularly in places from Somalia to Nigeria to Syria, having their heads chopped off, mass graves. But we don't talk about that because I don't know. What, is there something wrong with Christians? Do they not deserve our protection? No, instead we've got to have all-night Ramadan shows for the people who, you know, by and large in their book, it kind of has a very different viewpoint to ours. Alex, raising awareness of mental health to the level that we have was a huge mistake. We must stop creating policies based on small groups of people because everyone then jumps on the bandwagon. Look at ADHD and autism. People are working so hard to achieve those labels. Do you know what? I'm in agreement with you. Some people just need to grow up and take responsibility for their lives and instead go, oh, well, I can't because of this issue. Well, I can't because of this trauma. Well, I can't because I'm depressed, because I'm anxious, because I can't go into the workplace because I don't like neon strip lights. Oh, the sound of a kettle boiling, it triggers me. So I've got to work from home under my blanket. No, there's nothing wrong with you. Nothing wrong with you. You're being self-indulgent and we should have no tolerance of it. And I kind of agree. Look, mental health, serious mental health issues are awful and it's good that we talk about them. It's important we talk about them and address them. But I do sometimes think as well, we're becoming a nation who's a sort of hypochondriac when it comes to mental health. People just spend their lives on YouTube trying to determine what personality type they have and whether they suffer from an ism or some sort of acronym. PTSD, ADHD, OCD. No, I've got another acronym for you and I can't say it on the airwaves. And someone else has said, why is Alex dressed like Where's Wally? Well, cheers. Thanks. I thought I looked kind of, I don't know, American or French or something, but I do feel like a Wally. Thank you for your input there. Right, let's have a voice note from Des on migrants and see if that cheers us up.
The reason that these people come here over on the channel is for the benefits. The easiest way just to stop them coming is just to stop the benefits. They will stop coming. It's as simple as that. They know that when they get here, they're going to get 4-star hotel, they're going to get driving lessons, they're going to get 3 meals a day, they're going to get clothing, they're going to get a TV license, whatever they want, they get. And I've had enough of it.
I've had enough of it. And do you know what? I came out of a canny little policy the other day that I think we in the UK should be deploying. Do you remember during the whole Brexit debate, the way they tried to stop us having any sort of sovereignty, any sort of real freedom, was pointing out, oh, well, there can't be a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Ooh, that will break every single peace treaty ever being made. Blimey, that will have people picking up weapons again. Ooh, you can't have checkpoints. That border must be totally open. Well, we should build a massive detention centre, you know, just bunk beds like the Bibby Stockholm, but on land. Build a massive detention centre on the border of Northern Ireland and Ireland and say to put everyone in there, just whack them all in there, a bowl of gruel, and say, if you don't like it, EU's just over there. Walk down the road, it's an open border. Maybe then Brussels might do something about it. Right, we're going to take a short break now. Talking about Brussels doing something about it, talking about France wanting to do something about anything, it turns out Macron is deeply keen on getting engaged in defending Ukraine. We're going to be discussing the latest geopolitically with Colonel Simon Diggins after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Now, it seems to me that, well, negotiations have been taking place in Saudi Arabia over potential ceasefire have stalled because Kelsa Breeze, Putin does not want to play ball. And so Sir Keir Starmer's turned around and said Putin must be slapped with a strict peace deadline to end these deadly games. He's basically saying that this can't be dragged on and on and on for Russia to rearm, to have another push into Ukraine, to try and get even more land that they're then going to claim they can keep. Meanwhile, Britain, France and Germany are going to be sending military chiefs to Kiev for talks on creating a multinational force to ensure Russia sticks to any ceasefire. The so-called coalition of the willing to find out more. Let's speak to Colonel Simon Diggins. Simon, great to have you back on the programme. Anyone watching this from afar and saying, well, you know, maybe there's a trick up America's sleeve, maybe Russia are going to suddenly play ball, it just isn't really looking that way, is it? The more we learn about what's going on, I'm kind of waiting for the moment that Washington slaps down Moscow. Do you think it's going to happen?
No, not at all. And good morning to you, Alex. I suspect almost the opposite. What seems to be going on is a competition between Putin and Trump as to who can screw the most out of Ukraine. I mean, Trump's latest offer is that they'll take over all the oil and all the minerals in Ukraine and cut Ukraine in on the deal. I mean, so, and you know, if that doesn't work, then Putin's going to do it as well. So, I mean, at the moment, the prospects of a ceasefire look remote, and the prospects of sustainable peace look remote. And you're right. I see nothing in Washington's behaviour so far that's going to say to them, right, this is the moment, this is what we're going to do for you, because Putin won't play ball. He's just stringing everybody along.
Yeah, and they seem to both be using the airwaves to try and massage each other's ego. You've had Putin talking at an Arctic conference, basically saying, well, you know, America does have a historical claim on Greenland, as if to say, go on, have it if you like. And it makes me think, what on earth is going on here? Is there some sort of subterfuge or tacit understanding that if people want to land grab, they can get on and land grab if you're a big boy and a bully?
I think that's right. I mean, I think basically they're both people who are essentially revanchists in their view of the world. They both see things in kind of absolute terms. Putin wants to restore the Russian Empire in its various forms, and Trump sees sort of his own kind of quasi-imperial vision as the way ahead. And he's a property man, or he says he was. And so he looks in terms of, well, we're going to take over Greenland, we're going to take over Canada, we're going to take over the Panama Canal. Oh, and by the way, we'll take over Ukraine's minerals as well. And that's how he sees the world. That's his worldview. And he's now got the opportunity as President of the United States to put that into power.
I mean, I've always been a fan of MAGA as a concept. I wish we could doge Britain and the like over here. I also have agreed with the fact that Europe has been dreadfully weak when we saw the leaks coming out of that security WhatsApp group, basically saying Europe are freeloaders. I have a degree of sympathy with that to some level. I mean, you can't expect people in America to look over the Atlantic and say we've got to do all the heavy lifting to protect something going on in Europe when Europe themselves can't seem to agree on anything or don't want to put their hands into their pocket. But at the same time, there does seem to be this sort of creeping anti-Europeism, so to speak, in the White House, which perhaps we all thought when Trump came into power that he would be pro-British. Do you think this is sort of kindly love, so to speak? Pull your socks up, roll up your sleeves, get on with putting Europe first, because that seems to have been the messaging, or is there something else at play?
There's a bit of the latter. I mean, and in that sense, he's in a line of American statesmen, presidents, whatever, who've been saying to the Europeans for a while, and go back to President Obama, you know, his message when he talked about the strategic pivot to the east in 2014 was Europe needs to sort itself out. And that was based on what he thought was a mishandling of the Libyan crisis, which originally the British and the French said we'll deal with it, and then had to turn to Americans. So I think the general American political establishment is Europeans, you need to sort yourselves out. But there is something else going on, which is actually a kind of latent sort of isolationist American view, which is basically, you know, America is the shining light upon the on the hill, and the rest can go hang. It's worth remembering that even in 1940, even after the Nazis had started to invade Europe and the Russian and German pact, Roosevelt was elected to power in the United States on the basis he would not get the Americans involved in the Second World War. So this kind of isolationist, which also includes anti-Europeanism, is a very long-standing, if recently, hidden trait within American politics. Republicanism under Trump has brought that to the fore. So yeah, there's you know, a long-standing European sort itself out, but there's also something else going on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have some sympathy with it because I'd imagine for most people in America, Europe is a sort of far-off continent of old cathedrals and funny languages, in the same way that if Europeans were being asked as a collective to stick their hands in their pocket and be peacekeepers in Central America, we'd say, well, what's that got to do with us, potentially? What do you make of the visit to Greenland by Usha Vance, now J.D. Vance, and the reception there, and Trump sort of constantly repeating this assertion that owning Greenland is necessary? I mean, Greenlanders would say, well, look, you've got unlimited access to air bases over here. We've had a strategic relationship for so long. I mean, do you think that there is a world in which people in Greenland could be convinced that, considering they just get 500 million quid of Denmark and Denmark goes, OK, look after yourself, that life under American rule might be better?
You're right about the long-term relationship, and I was going researching the other day to sort of bring myself up to date. I think the Greenlanders want to have independence, but they also they are very comfortable with a strong link with America. But I think it's just the thing that Trump simply doesn't get. Actually, you get good support with people if they're on your team. But to be on Trump's team, you've got to do exactly what he wants, the way he wants to do it. What the Greenlanders are offering them, as you said, is, access to all the bases you want. I'm sure there'll be a kind of mineral deal there if that's what they want. But they want their independence. They want to be independent domestically from Denmark, as they are already, and they don't want to be tied to the United States and everything goes there. Of the strategic importance of Greenland, absolutely get it. Yeah, and you look at the Arctic, you look at a map of the Arctic and see how important it is. But actually, the Americans have got that already, and have had that ever since the Second World War. Yes, with the Arctic opening up, it's more important than ever. But I think all that kind of negotiation is open to the Americans. There's no need for them to annex or even threaten to annex the territory, not least of which because for foreign policy purposes, Greenland is still part of Denmark, which is a NATO country. So here we have Trump basically offering to take over without their consent part of a NATO country. That would be the end of NATO, and that really needs to be put very, very strongly across to Trump so he actually gets that.
Let's reflect a little bit on our own situation back at home. The latest sort of scandal that's emerged in terms of our own armed forces is that sensitive army papers have been found scattered in the streets. Piles of papers with confidential military information were just sort of put in massive black bags that have been torn open and are fluttering in the wind up north. I mean, what on earth is going on there? Why on earth is this stuff not being shredded on site rather than being in a black bin bag in Newcastle?
Well, nothing wrong with Newcastle, but I think there's sort of idleness which is clearly taking place. I don't think it's very difficult to identify where those documents come from. They seem to come from Catterick Garrison, not a million miles from Newcastle, and no doubt some individual, some scrote, will be putting his feet in front of the commanding officer to explain why he did not do exactly what he said, which is to burn classified information and to treat it properly. So, this is one of those scandals that happens in large organisations. Can't excuse it. It's disgraceful. It's wrong. But no doubt, I think the military, police and others will be able to deal with this one.
I want to go back to the coalition of the willing here, and it's 30-odd countries now might be involved in that. How likely do you think is it going to be the case that we are going to have to send troops over to Ukraine or defend Ukrainian skies with RAF planes?
I think it's more probable than possible, which is why I think we need to be very careful how we do it and how we plan it and bring people along. But at the end of the day, I think what's going to be required is leadership, and that does mean Britain and France actually saying, we're going to commit now, will you come with us? I don't think if you wait on all 30 people coming together and saying, yes, we're going to do it now, it's going to happen. I think we need to lead on this. I think other people will follow. And I think it is part of the solution. It will be very unpopular with Putin. But at the end of the day, our understanding and our stated policy is that Ukraine is an independent, sovereign country, in which case it can choose to ally with people as it so wishes. It's choosing to ally with us. I think we should be supporting them.
Colonel Simon Diggins, thank you ever so much for joining me today. I just read a couple of your messages before we go to break. Sheila in Hythe said, just a quick question. Have you ever heard a politician being asked specifically why they won't stop giving money to each and every illegal immigrant upon their arrival in this country? I've never heard the question being asked of any relevant politician. That's because the legacy media think these people are all refugees who deserve to be holed up in fancy hotels and have everything that their little hearts could desire thrown in their direction. Someone said, hi Alex, I love your show. Thank you very much, whoever you are, nameless individual. I'm 70 this year and have always felt proud and privileged to be British. Until now. This country has been completely ruined with little hope of a comeback. Now Labour are destroying any chance of me having a good retirement after working all my life. I'm glad I'm on my way out and not on my way in. I fear for our grandkids. This is the problem. I think a lot of people feel like that in this day and age. I feel like that. You kind of look at where we are in Britain. You look at the absolutely flagrantly reckless rates of migration. The latest figures are now putting the net migration levels as high as 900,000. So we're basically talking 1 million. And you look at the rates of crime. Yesterday, right, you know, again, walking through the tube station where I live, some kid in front of me, usual suspect, you know, loud music, leering at everybody, hood up, you know, in the lift, trying to intimidate people. I can do what I want. I'll play my music as loud as I like. Pushes his way through the barriers. Oh, the high-vis brigade just stood there, didn't they? Oh, poor wee thing, we better not mess with him. Just stood back. Almost every single major shop on the main road in London where I live is half boarded up now. This has happened in the period of 6 months. It's half boarded up. You no longer have an entrance and an exit. Come in the store one way, work your way around and go out the other way, because people are running in the entrance, filling their arms with meats and wine and running back out. In the Co-op, they've even had to put their meat, right, like lamb chops or a steak, inside a locked plastic box. And then I look at the tax bill I've just had to pay, and I look at that kid pushing through the barrier, and I look at the fact that it seems to be some sort of looting free-for-all on my street, and I look at all the leering men lurking around who've probably got a free hotel round the corner, and I think, why am I paying my hard-earned cash and I get nothing? I get nothing for it, not a thing. I can barely get a GP appointment. And me, like everybody else in this country, is thinking, I've had enough. At this point, I'd rather just move somewhere else. Let the country go. Let them have it. It's gone anyway. Well, do you know what? No, I'm going to stay and fight. I'm going to use my voice. I'm going to use my time. I'm going to use what energy I have left to still try and stand up for this country and protect it, because I think it's worth it. But by gum, on some mornings, it feels like a tough old job. Right. Going to take a short break now. When I come back, someone else who's having a tough old time at the moment is our King. He was taken to hospital rather urgently last night as a result of nasty side effects from his cancer treatment. We're going to be getting the latest on that after this.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. We'd all got rather used to seeing the King back in circulation, hadn't we? The King and Kate, who of course both were undergoing cancer treatments simultaneously, locked away from public eyes for significant periods of time, and they've both been back up to royal duties, and it's been great, you know, at least seeing our royals fit and well and getting on with things, except of course that has now changed. King Charles was taken to hospital after suffering side effects from his cancer treatment. Let's get the latest on this from Ingrid Stewart. Ingrid, great to have you on the programme. I feel like we're being reassured that this is a routine thing, it's a blip in the road, there's nothing to worry about, but at the end of the day we have a relatively elderly king with cancer, and the prognosis can only be so good.
Well, I think Buckingham Palace obviously play this down because they don't want everybody, you know, jumping up and saying, you know, what's happening to the king. But I think it does happen. We don't know what kind of cancer he has because he's been very careful not to say, so he's not associated with just one type of cancer. But obviously he's in the position that the tiniest thing that they might be worried about, they're going to pop him into hospital. It wouldn't necessarily happen to anyone else, but because, you know, he is our king, he's our head of state, he has enormous care taken of him. But the fact that he was only there at the London clinic briefly, and then returned to Clarence House and was sitting at his desk as usual, working on his red boxes and writing letters, which is something that he's done for about 50 years, writing letters, that is. He's very hardworking. And I actually think that probably he's under a lot of stress because everything that is precious to him is in danger at this moment. It's a bit like, Alex, what you were saying earlier. I mean, this is his country. He is our head of state. He's our monarch. And he's a huge lover of the countryside. He's a huge lover of farming. He's, you know, he doesn't want concrete over this lovely country. And he, you know, he's all about the environment and climate change. So everything he holds dear is sort of looking very precarious. And I think he's probably very stressed. And I know that stress and cancer are not a great mix. And though he looks sort of very happy and jolly, and he's wonderful when he goes out and he's always smiling and laughing, I think internally he's probably, you know, quite low about life.
Like a lot of us, but especially given the treatment he is having. We can report, actually, that while you've been on air, the King has been seen in public for the first time since a hospital visit. He's been waving at well wishers while leaving Clarence House in London in a car. So he's on the move. He's leaving Clarence House and he's going somewhere else. Perhaps he's going to Sandringham or somewhere like that, or Highgrove to put his feet up for the weekend. But how much behind the scenes preparation do you think is going on to ready William to take over the role? Because I think when Charles first became king, we knew he was an older king when he came to the throne, a lot older than his mum. But I think we all thought there's probably going to be a good 10, 20 years on the clock, potentially, that he's going to occupy that position. And I wonder now whether there is a sort of flurry behind the scenes in Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace to make sure that William is ready to hit the ground running. And especially, you know, he's had his own setbacks with his own wife's health battles. But I have noticed over a period of time William's image changing, you know, the beard, and it does seem to me like they're trying to present someone who looks a bit more kingly, so to speak. What insight can you give us into that?
I think he looks less kingly. I think that William looks more like a more modern man, and he certainly will be a very different monarch than his father. And he's, you know, he wants to take the monarchy forward, because if the monarchy doesn't change, it won't exist. It has to change with the times. And I think actually King Charles has done a brilliant job for the short time that he's been on the throne. And he seems to have really relaxed, and he He's always laughing and smiling, whatever he might be feeling inside. And he's very tactile with people, something, of course, that his mother never was. So I think that he's doing it his own way, and William will do it his own way. But as to preparations, well, I'm sure all the preparations are there in place. But I don't think that William is really concentrating on the future. I think he's just living in the present, because if he starts worrying about the future, he's going to be all over the place, I think.
Right, but do you think, if push comes to shove, do you think he would be ready if all of a sudden he finds himself in a position where the King's treatment isn't working, where there has to be a change of guard at the top? Is he ready to assume that role as head of state of this country, and probably the most high-profile monarch in the world? And one assumes, actually, when he becomes king, there'll be, I would imagine, I don't know, but I get the impression there'll be a whole sort of flurry of renewed international interest in our royal family again, because it will be seen as something brand new and modern. I think William and Kate have a lot of love in other countries. Has he got sort of broad enough shoulders to carry that mantle?
Well, he has to have broad enough shoulders, and I think he has. I mean, if you look, well, I mean, obviously you don't follow this like I do, but no. Recently he's been meeting with other heads of state, since way back last summer. And recently, of course, he was sent to Paris and met Trump. And he's right there with these other heads of state, not that he's one yet. And I think he is being prepared, or he's certainly preparing himself. And the King is sending him out to do these meetings and do these things so that he is prepared. But I don't think there's ever really enough preparation for that role, because it's evolving and it changes.
And we know that royal protocol in this country is for public neutrality. That, they never complain, never explain, and also don't reveal political positions. And actually, I quite like the fact that in our system, our head of state, the sting is taken out of it. That sort of tribalism is taken out of the head of state, unlike in a presidential system where people say, I like the president, I hate the president. In theory, the royal family being the head of state and remaining neutral is a wonderful gift to this country.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, that's what our whole constitution is based on.
Right.
Is that the monarchy is above politics.
But at the same time, we have had a sense of, certainly with King Charles, what his politics are. And we know that behind the scenes, the royals will voice their opinions to various prime ministers and other heads of state about what their attitudes towards certain domestic and global issues are. And you were saying earlier that, for King Charles, it's about the environment. It's about caretaking the countryside. It's about hunting, shooting, fishing, organic veggies, and self-sufficiency, and all of that stuff's taken quite a hit. Do we know what sort of keeps William interested, what his sort of pet passions are, what sort of king he might be?
Well, his pet passions are very much in line with his father's, but he would do it differently. Ages and ages ago, I think there was a press reception at Kensington Palace, and for some reason I got to talking to William about sort of organic vegetables. That sounds really exciting, doesn't it? But I mean, and he said, I'm going to do things differently, but I do agree with the things that my father says, but I would do it differently. I mean, that was a long time ago.
I get the impression he doesn't really have a strong personality or strong convictions. Am I wrong in that? Because I kind of feel like we don't really know much. He's lovely and everything. He seems very soft-edged and lovely and sort of universally likeable, but he doesn't seem to be someone who has sort of, heights of passion and massive interests in stuff.
I think he is, but I think we don't see that because William has been, it's sort of embedded in him not to reveal his true feelings in public. And we are the public, and we only see him in public. So that private side of the royal family, we know much less about than we used to, because going back, there was always people that were willing to talk to you about characters of the royals, and it's less so now because of security and because of I suppose it's because of the world in which we live now. So getting to actually know what they're like is harder unless you have first-hand experience. And even if you have that first-hand experience. They are on their best behaviour when they meet you, and it's all about, being charming, being nice.
And it has an important function as well. Ingrid Stewart, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. I think we can probably speculate at a couple of things that William does very much dislike, and they both happen to live in Montecito over in California. Right, going to take a short break now. When I come back, we're going to be, holding a wake for the UK's economy. Back after this.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock, in for a bit of communal catharsis, some radiotherapy, if you will. If you're like me, or if you're like Steve in Milton Keynes, you've probably just about had it to the back teeth when it comes to the country and the way it's being managed. Steve in Milton Keynes saying, I totally agree with you. My wife and I have had enough. We have a 2-year-old and simply don't want him to grow up in the UK. It breaks my heart, but we've decided to move overseas. The country simply isn't recognisable as the one I grew up in. And you know, I'm the one who says we got to stay and defend this nation. We can get it back to what it was. It's going to take some bold thinking. It's going to take some hardline policies. It's going to take a government of courage, and it's probably going to take gutting and dismantling most of the bureaucratic underbelly of this country, particularly pen pushers in Whitehall. But, you know, we might be able to do something about it. We might save it yet, but it does feel like it's, you know, pushing water up a mountain sometimes. So on that, talking about sort of doging the civil service, Sue Gray, you remember Sue Gray? That's it, the woman who seemed to wield all the power in Downing Street, rather unceremoniously booted out by the Labour Party and the various chiefs of staff jostling for position there. She, of course, the same fate happened to her as happened to anybody else who has served their purpose and served their time in the echelons of power. They get put out to pasture in the House of Lords. Anyway, Lady Grey, not Lady Jane Grey, Lady Sue Gray, did her sort of inaugural speech the other day and pointed out, well, you know, all this talk about, you know, about chainsaws and Doge and the bloated civil service, they do hear it, you know, it's not productive. And I'm like, let them hear it. Half of them can't be bothered turning up to work. Half of them want to go on strike because they're expected in the office 3 days a week. If you like home so much, stay there permanently. But anyway, on that note, the problem is a load of Brits are doing just that, aren't they? About 24% of us or 25% of us are no longer working, and a load of people, a quarter of Britain's now disabled, 2 million more since the pandemic, due to mental health alone. No wonder our economy is on the ropes. That and the gross mismanagement by this government and previous governments. Anyway, to speak at the wake of the UK economy, I've invited along Michael Simmons, economics editor at The Spectator. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning.
Now, is there any... Let's see if we can start off with some good news. I always hope there might be something. Didn't the OBR sort of say, oh, actually, growth might have been a bit better than expected?
Yeah, so we've actually had some new figures on growth this morning from the Office for National Statistics, and they show that over 2024 as a whole, the economy grew slightly faster than the OBR said it did even just this week. But what's really interesting about the revisions that we've had from the ONS today is they've revised the 3 quarters leading up to July, and have basically said that growth kind of stopped at that point. Well, they say growth stopped. The growth before then was hardly growth at all, but things slowed down at that point. And what happened in July? Well, we had a change of government.
So it's basically what happened here, that sort of infinitesimally, almost imperceptible flickering changes in growth that is down to people just holding off and not making any decisions about what they're going to do because they don't know who's going to be in charge and what the policies are going to be.
Well, exactly, and the British economy has suffered from this since the COVID pandemic now, really, that we've got this sort of low consumer confidence and low business confidence. Although, having said that, there was another slither of good news this morning in these retail figures that came out that said, actually, we're buying more from high street shops than we kind of had been expected to. So there's little glimmers of good news. But when we say there's good news, it's that something went up by 1% rather than being flat or falling. So, you know, it's good news in the context of British decline, but it's not really good news in economics more generally.
I mean, maybe we're buying more from high street shops. There's only about one of them left. Half the high streets in this country seem to be vape shops and Turkish barbers. So if you want to get anything, there's only one place you can pretty much go. I want to go back to worklessness here, because without a doubt, it's a huge drag weight on the UK economy when you've got a quarter of people saying they're disabled, 2 million more since the pandemic with mental health issues. They're not giving to the economy, they're taking off the economy. So some could be sympathetic in part to Labour's planned welfare cuts that's creating a massive backlash from backbenchers in that party. At large, do you support these cuts, or do you think, especially when it comes to things like carers allowances, that this is going to punish the most vulnerable?
Well, look, I think in general we need to reform the welfare system because, as you're pointing out in the introduction to this section, you know, with a quarter of people that say they're now disabled, 2 million more due to mental health, the economy is not going to grow if we have a welfare bill that's set to spiral to nearly £100 billion just for sickness. So I think, yes, reforms are needed, but I'm not sure this package has the right motivations behind it. I was really shocked, actually, actually, when we got the OBR's report after the Chancellor sat down from delivering her spring statement, that she'd taken her headroom back to the exact figure it was at the last budget. And obviously a big part of the cuts was these welfare changes. Now, if you were doing reforms to the welfare spending that was genuinely motivated by getting Britons into work, by reducing the bill, there's no way that you would come back to that exact same figure. So it seems to me that rather than, really thinking about these reforms, they've just moved things around on a spreadsheet to get back to a certain figure. And yes, as a result, carers, etc., some people are going to be hit. So it seems like it's come from the wrong motivations.
Now, the problem, I think, and tell me if my reading is wrong, I think we're kind of in an economic doom spiral, because part of the OBR sort of growth is said, oh, well, immigration has helped so much of that. That's actually helped a GDP increase. We've had net migration figures of around 900,000 at this point. Now, when Germany did a little examination of the impact of immigration on the German economy, they've said that it's actually not a benefit at all. In fact, it's net negative. Where do you stand on this? Because I worry that, there's an article today in the Telegraph talking about Stockton-upon-Tees, which has got one of the highest levels of worklessness in the country. 67% of all working age adults are economically inactive. 43% have no qualifications. Only 11 people had worked in the previous 12 months. But the problem is, what you can see here is Stockton-upon-Tees used to have a huge amount of industry. It had shipbuilding, it had chemical plants, it had all sorts of places where people could go and earn their crust, which frankly don't exist anymore because we've clobbered manufacturing. And so people say, well, OK, you want to get us back into work, where are the jobs? And then other jobs are essentially being shipped out to immigrants because it's a cheaper labour force.
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely right. And actually, you see this in the growth figures today, that even though they said in the last quarter that the economy grew ever so slightly, when you looked at that on a per capita basis, it's actually shrunk. And part of that because of this immigration, the 900,000 figure that you say. But that was a deliberate economic choice that the previous government made because of this worklessness crisis, that they looked at the amount of vacancies we had in the economy, the amount of people going on sickness benefit, the amount of people in places like Stockton-on-Tees, as you point out, that are out of work. And whatever the last government and various different prime ministers, we've had a few, said about migration, they quite clearly made a choice that rather than solving this worklessness problem, we are going to just import labour en masse. And that's, how we've got to where we are today.
What is the solution, though? Because people talk about this all the time, net zero immigration policy, the idea that we need to get the British back into work, that we shouldn't rely on cheaper foreign labour. You get some people saying, well, actually, I do want to work, but because foreign labour is cheaper, I'm now priced out of the marketplace. You get other companies saying, well, because energy bills are so high, we can't afford these costs and that costs. Perhaps some of the rules are different if you're talking about things like national insurance payments, which again, the impact of that, employers' national insurance going up, has yet to hit the UK economy. So what is the solution here? When it comes to worklessness and people on benefits, is that where we should be getting really tough? Those people who, should be described as fit to work, who potentially aren't, do we need to sort of cut back on the people who are allowed to say that they need to claim benefits for health reasons? And when it comes to people who are job seeking, do we have to sort of get a bit tougher, saying, well, you might have to travel a bit further, you might have to do something that you might be overqualified for it, but tough luck?
Well, I think it requires, carrot and stick. We need to do all we can to stop people getting into this, what was the not fit for work category, which Liz Kendall says she's essentially getting rid of in her reforms. But there will still be this idea that once you're on some kind of sickness benefit, that's you out of the workforce forever. We need to reduce the number of people going into that category, because once you do, you sort of never come out of it. And then on the, so that's the stick. And on the carrot approach, we need to look at this mental health crisis, in that the 2 million people say they can't work because of mental illness since the pandemic is just a staggering figure. And something's changed within the psyche of, us as Britons, that's now seen as a medical problem. When you're dealing with stress and anxiety, the reaction now is to basically self-lockdown, to put yourself. We need to get back to a place where people are encouraged to keep putting one foot in front of the other and to go to work and to get on with their lives. Now, I don't know how we do that, but until we fix that, welfare bill and welfare caseload is going to keep shooting up.
Well, you might not know how one does that, Michael, but I'm pleased to say, stay where you are, Michael, but I'm going to invite Adam, a caller, onto the show now, because he's actually calling in, because Adam, as far as I understand, you've got ADHD, but it's not stopping you from working. Tell me about the sort of symptoms you suffer from, the work that you do, and whether or not work is a benefit.
Sure. Well, work is a benefit for a lot of reasons, but I grew. I'm 46, so I grew up in a system that didn't recognise ADHD or dyslexia back then, and I was labelled as disruptive and naughty and put into special school, as it's kids with behavioural disorders, with a bunch of other kids that I way worse than me, and everything, brought up, and just didn't understand who I was or what I was until much later on in my 20s, when my stepmother sent me to the Dyslexia Association to be assessed. And ever since then, that also having that helped me in job. It helped me get the apprentice that I got today, because it's the only time I ever claimed benefits was when I went on dole for nearly a year and a half. But I needed to do that to get into the system to be put forth for an apprentice, which is what I've worked with all my life. Now I have that skill. It's the job I've done.
Well, what is your job? Do you mind me asking, Adam?
Sorry?
What is your job, darling?
Oh, I'm in construction. I'm a builder. Right. I work in social housing mainly, fitting kitchens.
Oh, wow. Okay. Can you explain to me, because ADHD, I hear a lot of people saying I've got ADHD. How does that manifest? How does that affect your daily life?
It's not a disability, let me tell you.
Yeah, so tell me, just explain to me, so someone who, maybe I've got it and I don't know, but explain to me what the impact is.
It's like sometimes you've got to make concessions. It's like, if you hire someone in a wheelchair, you're put in a ramp, okay? So you hire me, all I ask is give me instructions verbally, visually, or given me in the written form, because it won't mean nothing to me and I won't understand. I won't be able to process that information. I process information more verbally. I'm audio-visual, so I don't learn from reading anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm concentrating so much. The ADHD is concentrating so much on the words, I forget all meaning to it. So it's something like that. You forget things. You can walk into a room and forget why you walked into a room. It's stupid, annoying little things like that with the ADHD. Whereas dyslexia is a gift. It makes me see the world in a very different way. Albert Einstein was dyslexic. Jim Carrey is dyslexic and ADHD. Richard Branson's dyslexic. It's just a different way of seeing the world, and you learn in different ways. And that's the problem with the schools of what I grew up in, because they're all laid out to learn the same way. Sit in front of a desk and read this.
Right. So
it doesn't work with me.
So interesting. I'm going to go back to Michael here, our economics editor at The Spectator. There's Andrew saying, look, Adam, sorry, when it comes to schooling, it didn't cater for me, and therefore perhaps he was prejudiced against when it comes to systems we have of reading, revision, examinations, and then getting people into the apprenticeships. I was astonished when he said he had to go on the dole for a year and a half to be able to access that scheme. But then he also said it's not a disability. You can work. You must work. I mean, is this where we need to completely revitalise our approach? And perhaps what we've got now is a sort of blanket policy where doctors are overstretched. People go to their GP and say, oh, I'm really not well, I'm tired, I'm run down, and they just go, right, we're signing you off. And then that just sort of becomes a repeat prescription, if you will, rather than people actually getting treated for things or getting to the root cause of issues.
Well, exactly. And it goes back to this point of attitudes. I mean, it sounds like the system essentially worked for Adam in that he went on to benefits so he could access that help, and because he clearly wanted to work. So we need to differentiate between people that want to work, but there's some sort of barrier that the state can help them with, and then people who don't want to work. And on your point of GPs, there was a survey recently that we covered in The Spectator. It's something like over 80% of GPs sign people off sick sick due to depression when essentially they don't believe there's anything medically actually wrong with them. So we need to look at things that are, mental conditions, learning conditions, and say, do we really need to be medicalising them? And if the answer is no, then these people should not be in this category where they can't work, and instead they should be given support to get into work that's adapted and suitable for them, like in Adam's case.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Michael Simmons, economics editor at The Spectator. Thank you very much. And Adam, thank you ever so much for your call as well, my darling. I want to hear from you, actually. If you're somebody who's signed off work for mental health reasons, can you let me know why? Whether you'd like to work, whether the system's rigged against you. Is it depression? Is it PTSD? Is it ADHD? Is it OCD? Is it something else? Because when you've got 2 million people more since the pandemic, that's a huge amount to have gone up in basically just over 5 years, saying that they've got mental health and therefore unable to work. I want to know what's going on. Why are we so broken as society? Why are we feeling so stressed, so miserable? Is it down to the way the country's governed? Is it down to sort of losing touch with our communities and our belief in our nation and our belonging and our place in it? Is it simply because we spend so much time doom scrolling and social media is rewiring our brain? We're not going out, we're not interacting, we're not going to the local pub, we're not mingling, we're losing our sense of community. I mean, I don't know, let's put the country on the psychologist's couch, so to speak, on the chaise longue of catharsis, and see if we can dig underneath the bonnet. I want to hear your thoughts, please. 0344499 1000 is the number to dial. It's your standard network rate. So do join the conversation. That is what this is all about. That is why we call ourselves Talk. You have to talk as well. 8722 is the number to text if you don't want to talk. Remember to write talk before you write your message. And of course, if you wanted to send a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp, it is the same as the phone number, 0344499 1000. OK, going to take a short break now, but apparently Ed Miliband is dipping his greasy little paws into the company's treasure troves once again, because he needs more money for net zero. This time, he's having to put aside £8 billion in case his plans all go wrong. You couldn't make it up. That's coming up after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Well, you remember that video? I was burned into my mind, unfortunately. I've got PTSD from that, talking about acronyms and mental health, of Ed Miliband standing in some sort of wimwam field playing his ukulele. I mean, you just kind of think to yourself, that's it. That right there personifies Britain in 2025. That absolute moronic joke of a man with permanent nasal congestion making a video like that for his socials and coming out of his wacky policies and expecting the Labour Party to run over to the slave labour-loving massive factories of China with a giant charity cheque to say, oh, please, Mr. Xi, can we have some of your renewables that you so kindly make using coal-fired power stations? Because we're just going to decimate manufacturing here instead. Yeah, you know what I mean. Anyway, I kind of sometimes think that things can't get worse when it comes to Nutter Zero, but it can. Because apparently he's now having to set aside another £8 billion. Remember, it was about £9 billion he used for GB Energy, which has done one thing so far, which is spend 200 million on putting some solar panels on some hospitals. Out of 8.3 billion, it's managed to spend like 200 million of it, 0.2 of it, putting up some solar panels that they no doubt got from our mates in China who love a bit of carbon pollution. He now needs another £8 billion, right? Because he's gone hell for leather over carbon capture. And it sounds good, doesn't it? Maybe if there's all this carbon capture, the Labour Party might allow us to drill, baby, drill, right? Because they closed off all of those options in the North Sea. Shame, we could have been earning some good money from that and avoiding having to, you know, be attached to the teat of Qatar or Russia or some other ne'er-do-well country. But no, you know, we're just going to go for the carbon capture itself. And I was like, well, carbon capture sounds like a good idea. What, you just snatch the carbon out of the sky and store it and then people can just get on with getting on and manufacturing can be back? No, carbon capture apparently is really dodgy. It's untested. No one even knows if it's going to blimmin' work. And here's the rub. You couldn't make this up. The amount of energy that's needed to operate the carbon capturing at any sort of level that might have any sort of impact is extreme. It's voluminous. So hold on, we're not burning fossil fuels. We've got no energy. We've got the highest energy bills in the world. The highest energy bills in the world. And this madcap scheme, which someone goes, well, it's a nice idea in principle, but yeah, a bit untested, bit weird, is actually going to take a load of energy to operate. And so now Ed Miliband needs 8 billion quid to cover the risk of carbon capture because, well, you know, it's untested. Aren't we good, we Brits, throwing loads of money at the net zero situation? We're all mad. Let's speak now to Ross Clark, who's author of Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You. Help, China. And won't even save the planet. That's a brilliant book title. But actually, do you know, reading that, I've kind of done a little sort of précis of your entire book, I think, in this introduction. Talk to me about this 8 billion quid for carbon capture, because on the surface of it, before I read about it, I thought, oh, carbon capture, yeah, people keep saying carbon capture, carbon capture, carbon capture. We're going to be the world leaders in carbon capture. Do we want to be? Does it even exist?
Well, it's not just £8 billion, Alex. It's the government's already committed £22 billion to build some carbon capture demonstration plants. But it now transpires that Millipede has committed a further £8 billion to compensate the private companies who are developing this technology in the eventuality that the £22 billion turns out not to be enough and they make a thumping loss on the developing the technology. So, you know, so there's potentially £30 billion of public money going there. And put that in context, the benefit cuts, which caused such a hoo-ha in Rachel Reeves's spring statement, they're planned to save the government, taxpayers, £5 billion a year by the end of this parliament. So, I mean, it's a vast amount of money. And net zero, of course, is the great the unmentioned element of the government's fiscal problems, because it's swallowing billions of pounds. It's not just carbon capture and storage. We're having to reconfigure the national grid. We're having to subsidise the construction of wind and solar plants, giving them guaranteed prices over 15 years. It's endless, really, the costs of net zero. And, that obviously feeds into the government's overall fiscal situation. But as regards carbon capture and storage itself, it's not quite true to say it's entirely untested. I mean, this technology has been around since the 1970s. I mean, ironically, it was developed by the oil and gas industry to pump carbon dioxide underground to force out more oil and gas to increase the production from depleted fields. But what is untested is the element of storing carbon dioxide underground for very, very long periods, well, essentially forever, because if it ever leaks out, well, then, it's undone all the, the benefit.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds kind of risky. All of a sudden you've got, I don't know, how is it stored underground? Vast tanks full of CO2, and all of a sudden there's like an earthquake like just happened in Myanmar, and kaboom, what a load of CO2 bursts forth.
Well, yeah, the idea is to store this carbon dioxide in sort of aquifers which have been vacated by gas extraction in the North Sea. But will it stay down there? That's what we don't really know. Of course, if carbon dioxide does bubble up and escape from those aquifers, it's actually very, very dangerous, because there was an incident in Cameroon in 1986 where this was a natural phenomenon, not caused by carbon capture and storage, but where carbon dioxide was known to bubble up from this lake, and it asphyxiated, I forget how many people, but it was a very, very severe natural disaster. And, if we're going to store carbon dioxide underground in these aquifers, we've got to be very, very careful. I think what would be far favourable is if we could turn that carbon dioxide into some kind of solid form. It's possible even to create useful construction materials from carbon dioxide through this process. But of course, it is terribly expensive. And the idea where, Ed Miliband's promise he's going to save us £300 a year on our energy bills by 2030. When you look at the billions of pounds that he's going to have to spend to develop this technology, it's a rather different sort of figures tend to emerge.
When it comes to experimental things, so to speak, and the race for net zero and stuff that should be getting taxpayers' money for development, given that 22 billion with the 8 billion in case it doesn't work amount has been given for carbon capture, what about SMRs, small modular reactors in the world of nuclear? Because very often people say about nuclear, well, it's a bit risky, see what happened over in Chernobyl. Now that really creates, a sort of mass catastrophe if something goes wrong there. But arguably, we're some of the world leaders when it comes to small pop-up nuclear power plants, or the development of them, because we currently have a load of nuclear-powered submarines dotted around the ocean, which seems to prove that this technology is potentially safe. Is that also getting a look in when it comes to the handouts from, World Miliband?
Well, yes, there is money going into that, and I'm not against sort of seed capital for novel technologies, which, there's a very good reason we should want them to be developed, want them to exist. So, I'm all for putting some money into small modular reactors, although it has to be said, the development so far have not really suggested that it's going to be that much cheaper than building large nuclear power stations. There was a project in the US which was pulled last year because it clearly wasn't going to turn out as cheap as it was. But you've got to be be pretty hard headed about it when you're investing public money in these things. And when you look at carbon capture and storage, £22 billion of public money, and then there's another £8 billion of potential compensation if it doesn't work out economically. Well, what does that tell you about the expectations of the private companies who are investing in it? The fact that they have demanded this £8 billion in compensation, it tells me that they're not very confident that they're going to develop this technology and make a profit from it.
Well, when it comes to Ed Miliband, one thinks that net zero is his religion, in which he has blind faith. Ross Clark, thank you ever so much for joining me on the programme. Now, before we go to break, would you fancy going along to one of the big concerts of this decade, perhaps this year, without a doubt, but this decade even? Well, here's now an opportunity to find out how you could be in the chance of winning tickets to watch Oasis in Wembley.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Well, there you go. Good luck if you're entering. Don't miss out on that one. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be talking about, well, guess what? A load of prisoners this time. The most gnarly of prisoners are going to be released early because we still don't have enough capacity on our prison estates. And we're going to be looking at shoplifting issues. We're going to be looking at machete attacks. That's right, Britain. It's a bastion of safety, isn't it? That's coming up after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Mr. O'Sullivan's been messaging me, actually. I should read out his messages. No, I probably can't do that. But it's good. I liked it, Kev. Anyway, right, while I have been on air, you'll be pleased to know that, do you remember this whole hoo-ha about that when it comes to sentences, there should be softer sentences from people from ethnic, cultural or faith minorities? And you had Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, say this is absolutely not right. We don't want this. I'm from an ethnic minority. I wouldn't want to be treated differently. She said, I've been clear in my view that these guidelines represent differential treatment under which someone's outcomes may be influenced by their race, culture or religion. It's unacceptable. And I formally set out my objections to this in a letter to the Sentencing Council. Well, the Sentencing Council has rejected them. It's basically said that it's up to us, we're independent, and therefore we're going to push ahead. Great. Two-tier justice is going to be here to stay. So that's right. If you're a white Brit and you happen to commit an offence, you'll face the full force of the law. But if you're not, if you're from a minority religion or a different skin colour than white, or you're born abroad or whatever, you crack on. Go and loot and rob and rape and pillage because you'll get a softer approach when it comes to your sentencing. I mean, this disgusts me. It disgusts me. This is racism. When you have one lot of people being given special treatment and another lot of people being essentially punished because of their skin colour, that is racism. That's what that means. This is what this is. If you're from an ethnic minority or a faith minority, you get a softer sentence. That's taken into consideration. In what world do we live? Can you imagine if those guidelines said if you're white and English speaking and a Christian, you have a softer sentence because, oh, do you know what, actually, life's been harder for you. Or, well, we've got a bit like an insurance policy. We've got more faith in you guys. So if you actually break the law, then, we'll probably deem a lesser sentence. It's out of character. I mean, if this was the other way around... If this was the other way around and someone was saying, oh, because you're a middle-class white woman who goes to church, we're not going to be as harsh on you, can you imagine the outcry? Well, of course, what the Sentencing Council would say is, oh, because you're those things, they probably are softer on you in the first place, which is why if you're not those things, you've got to have the softness built in. Oh, just make it make sense. Honest to goodness, when I look around London... and I see active crime taking place in front of mine eyes, when I see people pushing through barriers on the London Underground, when I see people running out of the co-op with arms full of, swag, when I see people carrying zombie knives with their hoods up on Lime bikes, I'll tell you what, they don't look like my local pastor. They just don't. Right, let's speak to Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. Mike, I mean, how on earth are the police supposed to go about doing their jobs when, first of all, the police are constantly worried about being called racist and being encouraged to wear rainbow lanyards and take the knee, and now they know when they finally get a ne'er-do-well in front of a judge, depending on who the ne'er-do-well is, where they come from and what faith they have, they're going to be treated differently.
I agree with you, Alex. It's gone absolutely crazy, hasn't it? We used to have a saying, didn't we, that justice was blind. Well, justice isn't blind anymore. She's looking down and saying, oh, you've got a different skin colour, I'll give you a different sentence. And only about 3 or 4 months ago, I seem to remember being told that believing that there was two-tier justice was a far-right conspiracy theory. But no, we have the proof and these people have come forward. But Alex, you only have to look at the members of the Sentencing Council, and it's full of what you would describe as centrist dads and judges, all well-meaning, and women of the same ilk, and one black woman on it. That's it.
Oh.
There's a sort of top. And it's just these people live in a world of middle class. They're champagne socialists.
Yeah.
And not one of those people would think like us. Not one of them probably voted for Brexit. They have an utter groupthink. And in their weird world, you've got all this DEI or whatever it's called this week, and they insult people. If you're black, you're being insulted, or you've been told you're being judged at a lesser standard. It's simply not good enough. And the arrogance of them to just tell the Home Secretary to clear off as well, it's just sums up these people. They think they're clever, right, and they know much better than us.
Do you know what I'd like to say? Dear Labour Party, you basically created the vast majority of these quangos. Now, I don't know the provenance of the Sentencing Council and which wise egg decided that was a great idea to have that. But if you don't like them disagreeing with you, if you don't like the wind being taken out of your wings when you're supposed to be in charge of this stuff, scrap them. Get rid of them. Let's have that bonfire at the Quangos. Let's have some democratic accountability for policies being made in this country, not some sort of double-barrelled Hugo sitting there being sympathetic to everybody so he could talk about it over his claret at the dinner party. Oh, isn't racial injustice so awfully troubling? Well, you'll be pleased to know that I've looked into this and I've made sure that from now on... Shut up, Hugo. Shut up. Right. You'll be pleased to know as well, Mike, that now with the early release system, it's people who've already served X amount of their sentences. It's no one who's committed domestic abuse. It's no one who's actually dangerous. No hardened thugs are the ones who are being given the opportunity to get out early. Well, that's changed. Of course it has. Early release for serious offenders is now part of the UK's new prison reforms. Violent criminals handed lengthy jail terms are now going to be among those who will serve less time behind bars, according to the Justice Secretary. I mean, again, when you have worked hard, you've been a Met Police detective, chief inspector, and the amount of effort that goes into and the caution that police have to take to make sure these people reach the threshold of being able to be prosecuted and then sentenced, it must really stick in your craw when they pop out of jail after a few years.
Well, it's absolutely scandalous, isn't it? Because as a police officer, you want to make people safe. And you see these wicked criminals being released. It used to be 50%, now it's 40%, and now it's even less. And there's a report today about a man called Liam Matthews. He was released in September in Cleveland. On the same day he's released, he was serving a sentence for violent disorder. He was released as part of this scheme. And on the same day he was released, he killed another man. So he's just been convicted of manslaughter. So it'd be fascinating to know how many of these early release scoundrels are actually committing more crime. Because what I know as a detective, I used to speak to criminals who used to give me information, and you get an insight into their life. And the one thing they fear is being locked up. They don't fear these ridiculous community sentences or warnings or any of this rubbish. The only thing they fear is being locked up, and that's been taken away. And often these characters, whether they're the sentencing council or the people making these decisions around early release schemes, they don't live anywhere near these people. They live in a nice house in Surrey or whatever. They don't live in a council estate in Cleveland, Bolton, Stoke or some other place where these scoundrels just make everybody's life an absolute misery. And them being locked up means that working class folk have an easier time and have a better life. But what they should do is make them live next door to the people who decide to release them early. Then they'd think about it.
Yeah, give them a tent in the back garden. I mean, this is where prisons have reached a 99% capacity again last week. There's had to be emergency use of police cells to detain prisoners. This is despite a brand new prison, HMP Millsyke, that's just opened, part of the previous government's plan for new prisons, which is supposed to be creating 14,000 new places by 2031. There just seems to be a heck of a lot more crime going on. And then this, again, another story that's really got on my wick. She was a member of a professional shoplifting gang dubbed the Spice Girls. She nicked £19,000 worth of designer items. So this gang struck shops at Bluewater in Kent, Lewis in Sussex. They're from southeast London, taking designer bags, skirts, shirts, all these various bits and bobs that just simply cost a load of money. But instead of being sentenced, she got off. She got off because apparently she's got mental health issues.
Well, again, the police only solve 1% of theft. So this is one of those 1%. So even this doesn't work. And how can mental health stop you being charged with stealing so much? And the trouble I see, Alex, is just like you said about the people running out the co-op with their hands full of swag, is that it comes to the point where society sees these, it comes to a tipping point where obeying the rules, playing the game, obeying the law becomes the stupid option because you see everybody else, thieving and doing what they want and no consequences. And those handbags, that 19 grand's worth of handbags or whatever they are, would have been sold for at least 5 grand. So where's that money? This woman's just had that off. And there's so many hardworking people in this world who look at that and think, why should I continue to play the game?
Right.
Because other people are just taking the mickey.
This is the thing. We no longer live in a high-trust society. It's all basically just collapsed to nothing, and law and order and the lack of it is a huge problem. I mean, there was a story today in The Sun, brilliant newspaper, a few floors down from where I am currently sat, which shows vile thugs with machetes and axes slashing at people in this horrific attack in London, Pennyfields Park in East London on Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday afternoon, they got their hoods up, they got these massive weapons, whack, whack, whack. Then they just sort of, yeah, go on, sort off down the street carrying their massive weapons. What?
This isn't a place, as you said, this isn't a place where people will take their kids to play football and the like. And it's, as I say, as you said, 5:45 in the evening. You usually associate these things with a dark corner in the middle of the night.
Right.
But it's getting more and more blatant. But what you have here is you've got a police force who are utterly afraid to stop and search people, especially if they're of an ethnic minority, because if they get accused of racism, they'll get the sack. And then when they get to court, only 3 out of 10 knife offenders are actually sent to prison. And what's even worse, the law says if you get 2 convictions for knife offences, you're supposed to go to jail. But only 4 out of 10 of those people actually go to prison. So you've got people not getting, knives aren't being found in the first place for a lot of times, but even when they are, the people aren't being sent to prison. And this results in a massive increase in knife crime, and people being utterly afraid to walk the streets. Or you can see there, that's the Queensbridge station. It's just outrageous. And the clever people, the folk that you get on the sentencing council, these are the people who are responsible for this nonsense. We need more prisons, and we need to lock up those who do wicked and evil things.
Couldn't agree more. Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector, thank you ever so much. It's amazing how quickly these things have become normalised. Like, even when I moved to London 4 years ago, if I saw someone tooling around with a blade, I'd be shocked, I'd be horrified. I kind of feel like if I saw someone tooling around with a blade now, I'd just went, London, isn't it? Because it's weird how quickly these things just get built into social psyche, that this is just what happens now. It's perfectly normal. I was walking through Berkeley Square the other day and I thought, better not have my phone on display. Better zip up my handbag and put it double across my shoulder, because the muggers are in, you know, at large everywhere around Berkeley Square and in Mayfair. And yeah, I thought to myself as I was walking across Berkeley Square, back in the day when I used to be UKIP's head of press and we actually had offices on Brooks Mews just up from Berkeley Square, I used to walk to work. And the reason I used to walk to work is so I had mobile phone signal and could field a load of calls. So I used to walk from Westminster to Mayfair like this, glued to my phone, didn't think anything of it. Now, when I'm lost and I don't know where I'm going, I'm terrified to get this out of my handbag because someone's going to come along and snatch it. They've tried to mug me twice now. Twice. Right, we're going to take a short break. When I come back, I want to hear from you. What have you got to say on all these topics? 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. I'm back after this.
He was marching towards us, shouting, gesticulating. We didn't know what he was going to do, and the people we were speaking to were saying that these are the bad guys, essentially.
Yeah, right.
These are the
and are there in those campsites that you witnessed there, where the people smugglers are hanging around? Are there any sort of authorities? Is there any police there, or what?
No, it was just the volunteers who were there to provide medical support or provide food, but.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, hello, welcome back to the show. Let's go straight to the phone lines and speak to Dan, who's in Warrington. Hi there, Dan.
Hi, Alex, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fuming. Every time I listen to your show, I'm fuming. But it's because you talk so much sense. And your last guest, though I agree with the majority of what he said, there's no need to build extra prisons. We can deport 10,000 foreign criminals instantly. I'm not even the one, because you have to do a lot to get into prison these days, right?
Right.
So my view is, even if you stole something from a shop, just low-level crime, and even low level of crime has a big effect, then people, if they're not from this country, you can deport them. If they're underage and they commit the crimes, deport the family. And if we need prisons, you can throw up a few makeshift prisons using shipping containers very easily.
Well, do you know what? What you say, Dan, is that we should be doing this. We should be able to deport foreign criminals. I 100% agree. But it turns out the proof ain't in the pudding, because of the Hugos of this world, because of various useless barristers that we've got and judges who sit around and think that any old excuse, any old spurious, tenuous arguments amounts to a defence of human rights. And do you know what I did the other day, Dan? I sat there, I said at the very start of this programme, I sat and did a little audit, didn't I, of various human rights excuses, and came up with 26 that I found from 2025. I'll rattle through a few of these. An Iraqi cocaine dealer who wasn't deported because he's now too westernised. Oh, yeah, integrated into the drugs underworld. We obviously know about the chicken nugget gate. Another woman wasn't deported to the Caribbean because her husband says the weather there is too hot. What?
I'd be tempted. I mean, it makes my blood boil. I'd be tempted to look at these judges and actually look at them. Look at them and look at their computers.
This is a failure. They're failing us in what they're supposed to do, which is protect law and order in this society, protect the integrity of the country. Albanian criminal who broke into the UK 4 times is now allowed to stay because, I don't know, God loves a trier. Another migrant avoids deportation because he lost his phone. He said he was fleeing Iraq because he was fixing his exams over there, and if he goes back, he's going to be punished, and it's going to be horrible. And they said, all right, show us the evidence. Oh, sorry, I threw my phone into the sea. A Jamaican cannabis dealer avoided deportation because he said to the judge, I'm only going to smoke weed, I'm not going to sell it. I thought both were criminal. A woman-beating criminal from Poland says he's a father figure to his nephew. Yeah, great role model you make, sunshine. I mean, that's just 7 I've given you there. I compiled a list of 26. I could go on, except it'll take towards the very end of the show. Dan, thank you ever so much. Now let's have a quick conversation with Laura Jane in Hampshire. Hi, Laura Jane.
Hi there, Alex. I disagree with you. I'm afraid I have to put you right on the Henrys who are doing the sentencing. I don't want to give you a social class lesson, but I do want to say that I live in a county full of the Henrys and the Henriesses, and I live next to 2 judges, male and female judges, and I can tell you that any of the people that I grew up with or knew would not be sentencing according to religion, etc. It's a different type of person, and I really want to get that across on the radio, because to the talk listeners.
Who are we to blame? Who are these people coming up with this rubbish stuff?
I think what happens is that when we're at university, at different universities have worse reputations. I mean, I was at Edinburgh University. I'm 65 now, so a long time ago. And I definitely went through my communist phase, as my dad called it, and he sent me down to Somerset to canvass for a relative who was going in for Parliament Conservative because he thought I was really becoming a raving, loony communist. And it is true. We at certain unis, I think what happens is it gets ingrained into you to be embarrassed by your background, say, or you just get at uni, you sort of look at yourself and you're ashamed of what your background has done. So you think you can do something to change it. So it's got nothing to do with what used to be called Hooray Henrys. It isn't that at all. In fact, I think it's the opposite now. Those of us who maybe, if you're going to look at social class, have joined things like reform, it's either, for want of a better word, different, people from my sort of background. I mean, I've got 2 prime ministers in my background.
Wow.
And I can tell you, there is no way that either of those prime ministers, were they back today, would have come and voted for this kind of thing.
Laura Jane, a brilliant point, well made. I'm cutting you off, my darling, because I've actually got to go to advert break, but a brilliant point, well made. You can't just broad brushstroke everyone and say it's all the Hugos and the Hooray Henrys. And she's right. People are being radicalised in a sort of crazy, suicidal leftist way on university campuses. Right, we're going to have to take a short break now, but stay tuned because there's another hour coming up of Common Sense. This is Talk, and we are the home of just that. Back in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. We've got 1 hour left to really get our knickers in a twist and lose our rag at various things going on in the country. Ted just came in today, just then, my producer Ted, and he went, I've not really seen you this angry before. You're really grumpy, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, do you know what? I'm going to finish work. There are a few bits and bobs I've got to get up to and probably go and sit at home all by myself and feel miserable. Because I really do feel, I mean, I tell you what, we talk about mental health a lot, don't we? And doom scrolling and phones. And someone gave me, my best mate gave me a really great bit of advice the other day. Was it my bestie? I think it was her. And she said she had heard somewhere that, you know, the worst thing you can do is wake up in the morning and pick that thing up straight away, pick your phone up straight away and go, I'm going to look at X, I'm going to read all my text messages, I'm going to look through my emails. You know, the minute you wake up, just getting straight down into the World Wide Web, because it's going to mess you up for the rest of the day. It's going to put you in a really bad place. But unfortunately, I wake up at the crack of dawn when I do this show, and I read all of the news stories because I've got to be prepared. So I actually woke up. I tell you what, I had a good night's sleep last night for the first time in forever, because most of the time at 4 o'clock in the morning I'm woken up by screeching sirens or people with those sort of really loud exhaust pipes on motorcycles. You know, 4 o'clock in the morning, rattling my brain inside my skull. But I actually had a good night's sleep last night, and I woke up and I was like, right, let's prepare for the show, shall we? And Ted and I had a conversation about what was going to be in the show yesterday. And it's just, by the time I'd finished going through all the news, even with a cup of tea, I was just ready to start a revolution. I was ready to begin the insurrection. Because it's just from what screeching catastrophe to the next at the moment. I've got someone who might be able to help me though. I love her. She's one of my favourite people. And so she's going to be here to sort of, I don't know, she might not be able to put my mind at rest, but she's certainly going to put an arm of comfort around my shoulders and say, do you know what, Alex? I get it. It's Baroness Claire Fox. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Alex. I don't want to be your therapist, but I'm not quite as angry as you.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. I need someone less angry than me this morning. But let's see if we can actually raise you up to where I'm at. So let's start off with this. This is an exclusive story, a bit of research that our clever bods here at Talk have done, which is the amount of money being splurged on diversity officers. And this is in particular Essex Police. They're spending more than £600,000 a year on diversity, enough to fund 20 extra frontline officers, 20 extra police officers, and instead they've got a diversity and inclusion manager, several positive action constables, and they've even got a lead chaplain for diversity. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Essex, which when it comes to diversity isn't necessarily the most diverse place on planet Earth anyway, I'm pretty sure when it comes to, oh, cuts, it's all cuts that mean we don't have people stopping shoplifters, could do with the 20 extra coppers instead of all these people with multicoloured lanyards and badges.
Completely agree with you, of course, on that. It just shows you, doesn't it, that even when you think the tide has turned a bit, and I think there has been much more cynicism, actually even amongst politicians, about necessarily the virtues of just having these EDI or DEI, diversity, equality and inclusion policies everywhere, that they've kind of snuck into the nooks and crannies of every single institution. And it's almost like, how do you cut one head off and another one jumps up? This story from Essex is particularly shocking because obviously we are at the moment in something of a crisis about how policing is done. Real concerns that the crimes that people worry about that make you angry or get people concerned, you know, when criminal activity is happening, and when you call the police, they're just not responding very quickly. So the idea that they would prioritise 9 very well-paid diversity officers is an affront. It's like a slap across the face to the public. And ironically, if you read what they say, we think it's very important to understand the diversity of the local area in order to engender trust from local people. And you think, you're coppers. The way that you will get people to trust you is if you do your job.
Exactly.
And your job is not to wander around with an ideological agenda in which you effectively end up lecturing the public about the fact that they don't understand the ins and outs of inclusion. And we know where this leads. It does mean that you end up with a police officer with a rainbow lanyard turning up at your front door saying, we just want to have a chat with you about the post you put on social media. It's not a crime. It could be a non-crime hate incident. We want to warn you that if you carry on, you might slip into being a far-right terrorist any moment. And that's the kind of passive-aggressive threat of these diversity officers. A waste of time, but actually, genuinely,
a danger.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've always wondered, I was just thinking, Claire, there's a documentary in this somewhere because no one's actually done the undercover day in the life of a diversity officer. No one shadowed one of these people to find out what they actually do on a day-to-day basis and how some of them attract 6-figure salaries and for what. And, you know, like you said, it slips into becoming a danger. And I think today about a story that broke while I was on air about Sentencing Guidelines Council, whatever they call themselves, saying actually there needs to be a 2-tier system. This stuff gets implanted implanted within the psyche of society. And then it makes me think about my trip to work today and going through the tube gates, and some kid, usual suspect, headphones on, leering at everybody in the lift like this, you know, looking deliberately intimidating. Yeah, they know what they're doing, and they've got their music on loud, and they're sort of staring at people doing all this, and then just pushes through the barriers, and the high visors just stand there and just, you know, carry on gossiping because they can't touch him, they can't do anything. And this is the thing, it unpicks safety.
No, well, I mean, the difficulty with it is, although your example of the sentencing council is a really good one, which is, I actually am prepared to take Shabana Mahmood at face value, the Justice Secretary, because she's actually been fairly sensible in everything she said in relation to identity politics in general and on this two-tier sentencing in particular. But she says, what can I do? We've got this sentencing council. Yeah. As though the sentencing council was an act of God and has been there forever. But actually, the sentencing council it was also created by politicians. Yeah. But this is what happens in institutions as well. You can imagine that the Essex police hierarchy, they set up, they tick a box by employing all these diversity officers. Maybe they started off with 2 or 3. Then that group start running training, because you say a day in the life of a diversity. What do? They look around the Essex police force and they say, this bunch have got a bit of anti-woke attitudes. There's something a bit dodgy about some of the way that they understand the nuances of, you know, trans inclusion or what have you. And they say, what we need to do is to run a training course. We're going to need some more officers to help us. And the next minute, you know, it kind of grows into an industrial-sized unit within the police force, which attacks other officers for saying the wrong thing, and then kind of almost like incites them to become zealots in the campaign for EDI, you know, everywhere you look. And and then everyone kind of loses control, because you imagine there's loads of people in Essex going, we didn't really intend them to be quite so powerful. Yeah. And what can we do? And it's like, you created this in the first place. Stop now.
Yeah, the sacrosanct DEI officer. You can't sack the DEI officer because you're probably a racist if you want to get rid of the person who's trying to combat racism. Instead, they're actually just spreading racism. Now, let's talk about Angela Rayner's banter crackdown. Even the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and I'm not a big fan of the Human Rights Act and all the legislation that's come out of that is constantly misused, but they have said new rules that are going to require companies to take all reasonable steps. Again, you've got to be careful when you're using language in our courts. To prevent harassment of staff by third parties is too broad brush and could lead to excessive limitations on debate. Now, to spell this out to people who are listening who might not know about this legislation, imagine, so you go to court, a bar lady's working, you know, in a pub, and a man goes, something, makes some sort of comment that she doesn't like. And then she takes the pub to court saying that they didn't take all reasonable steps to prevent her being harassed. The problem with this is, what are they supposed to do when you've got customers? And this is what third parties are. They're not people you employ. They're people who've walked into your premises from somewhere else. If they're then deemed to be insulting or offensive, this is basically a bit like, you know, the person in Starbucks who doesn't ask someone's pronoun to put on the cup of coffee, and then someone's, well, no, they've got a pronoun, that's it, and a customer doesn't sort of acknowledge them by their pronoun. They can then take Starbucks to court. I mean, this stuff is just evil. It's evil.
So one of the things is that this is a clause within a huge piece of legislation called the Employment Rights Bill. And it's a real flagship bill for the Labour government. And actually, all talks, viewers and listeners should really keep their eye on this. It's just started to be discussed in the Lords, because this bill has grown into one of the hugest amounts of regulatory intervention in the workplace ever. But of course, it's done in the name of workers' rights. And I'm, you know, my leftiness means that I'm all for enhancing workers' rights. But there's a lot in this which is going to be incredibly damaging, actually, for workers as well as workplaces. So keep your eye on the general. On the specific that you've said, is this is posited as helping workers. So they say, if you're a worker, as you say, let's use the example that was used in the Lords yesterday by Lord Strathcarron. Say you work for a bookshop, and there's a book launch in your bookshop, and maybe it's a book launch of J.K. Rowling's book, right, of a new book coming out. And somebody who attends that book launch wears a T-shirt saying adult human female. A member of staff, a worker at that bookshop, can sue the bookshop because they felt harassed by a third party, somebody who went to the book launch, right? Can you imagine how much judicial intervention there's going to be? So you are running a company that's public facing, a pub, there's a whole range of things that are public facing, and you can take offense. Wait for it. You don't even have to be offended on your own behalf. You can be offended on somebody else's behalf. It can be somebody else. So you can actually, as a member of staff, hear somebody use a term that you consider to be, for example, Islamophobic in inverted commas, and take offence on behalf of another member of staff who might be offended by it and sue your employer. But this is completely ridiculous. I really do think, and it's a credit to the Free Speech Union, and of course Toby Young, now Lord Young of Acton, has now come into the Lords, for drawing attention to that particular clause. But we know it's part and parcel of this watch what you say, look over your shoulder all the time. And we've just been talking about the police. And I think in my speech, I talked about how Rick Pryor, who's the head of the Police Federation, he got done recently. In other words, he's a trade unionist, if you want, an officer in charge of rank and file officers. And he went on to speak on behalf of his members to say, did some TV interview and said, actually, there's a real problem here, which is a lot of police officers are frightened to intervene in case they get done for racism. Yeah. And then his own federation suspended him, cut off his trade union email, all the rest of it, and he has now been banned from standing in union elections. And so according to this new law, in which is all about help the workers, actually that's not true. But this is the thing. It's only if you say the right thing and your workers who go along with the orthodoxies of the day. And this is the thing, the right thing and the orthodoxies of the day, because it ties us back, doesn't it, to the whole sort of DEI stuff, where we know what's considered an insult and what isn't. If someone decided to stop me in the street outside of this building and shout at me, well, no, come target this building, right? Stood outside the building wanting to protest against me for being a far-right Nazi scum or something like that, you Karen, you gammon, you racist. If they came and shouted that, well, that's okay, because I probably am. Because it's true. That's the way they'd see it. But that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. That wouldn't be, oh, no, I've got no reason to be upset by that, being called a racist or far-right or scum. I deserve that. But if I happen to have, like, a short fringe and a beard and decided to go by the name of Jacqueline and someone accidentally called me Jack instead, then I've got every reason to get uppity and drag someone to court. It's some sort of really sick cult. Absolutely. And it's dangerous, and it goes back to the sentencing guidelines as well. It goes back to this idea that if you have certain attributes, if you're not essentially British-born, English-speaking, white and Judeo-Christian, you somehow are one of life's victims and constantly need special treatment. I mean, it's also true, but it is also true that, there's an awful, it is protected characteristics, but we wouldn't want to pretend that a lot of the people who play the victim card in this actually are endlessly, white middle-class liberals, right? And sometimes, and I don't even want to be in the situation where I have to basically plead on behalf of the white working class that they're like a victim group that needs to be protected. The main thing is, as a point of principle, it is ludicrous to be in a situation where words are used as though they're weapons and treated as harassment, because when we say that we want to protect workers from harassment, it is completely reasonable that if you work anywhere and some goon comes in and starts physically, touching up the bar staff or being harassing, right, and really violent and obnoxious, I think it's fair enough that the member of staff can say to their boss, this is terrible, this bunch have turned up. But what they mean by harassment is words. And this is why it's a massive free speech issue. You're in a situation whereby you can be casually having a chat with your mates in a pub, and a member of staff can overhear you, take offence, and then have the right in this law, if it passes, to sue your boss for exposing you to harassment through words.
Right, and we know there are people who just sort of professionally have grievances and do all this kind of stuff. You were talking earlier about Shabana Mahmood saying, actually, by and large, Secretary of State for Justice says good things, is on the right side of all of this. And just to repeat what her statement was, she said, "I have been clear in my view that these guidelines represent differential treatment under which someone's outcomes may be influenced by their race, culture or religion. This is unacceptable. And I formally set out my objections to this in a letter to the Sentencing Council last week." And the Sentencing Council ignored it. Like you said, Claire, they should just be scrapped. And actually, let's call this what it is. She says under which someone's outcomes may be influenced by their race, culture or religion. If your outcomes are influenced by the colour of your skin, that's racism. And I don't understand why the left is so excitable about using the word racism where it doesn't exist, and where you've got something that clearly is racist, i.e. special treatment if you happen to be non-white and non-Christian, they're not going to call it by that word.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what's happened is we've racialised society. And just to make it clear, through identity politics and racialising society so that we now see things, particularly in relation to race, through the prism of skin colour. And obviously we know that that started with people saying, if you're white, you're somehow have some kind of original sin, you know, that you're guilty of colonialism, you know, you have to take responsibility for slavery. And even if you're poor and white, you're privileged. All of those kind of things. The problem now we've got is that some people on the opposite side, as a reaction, start also racialising things, which is to see things through the colour and to basically say, we are white and therefore we are certain. It's like, sort of, stop thinking about people's skin colour.
Exactly.
The ethnicity that you have is not relevant in this instance. This is different, by the way, to a debate on immigration. Completely different. When people sort of try and merge these two things, we should be wary. What I think we need to do is to basically detoxify this discussion and take the racializing element out of it. And the sentencing guidance is not helping. But it's also worth saying that in addition to religion and ethnicity, that you could somehow get special treatment, i.e. not go to prison, because that's what the sentencing guidelines are asked to look at. It's also the case that that was for transgender people as well. They're also a protected characteristic that would mean that you could be given, as a judge, an excuse for saying, even though they did the same crime as that person, because of these particular things, we can then not send them to prison. No wonder people are getting stirred up and talk about two-tier justice. They're rightly furious that we're not all equal under the law. And if we're going to be all equal, then what you don't do is look at colour or protected characteristics or victim status when you make a decision about who goes to prison.
I couldn't agree more. Baroness Claire Fox, thank you ever so much for joining us. Now, if you want to join us on the programme, it's your opportunity after the next advertisement break. The number to call, 03444 99 1000. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note, 87222 on the text, like talk before your message. Everything is your standard network rate. I'm back after this.
British people, Australian people. The staff have said this is the first earthquake, the first big earthquake they've ever had. Apparently there was one 20 years ago, but they're still searching for some people who were staying in the hotel. Someone over there is missing his brother at the moment, so they're trying to work out who's here, who's not here. We don't know if we're going to be allowed back in the hotel anytime soon. And also, no news on planes coming in or leaving Bangkok.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Right, shall we hit up the phone lines and speak to Steve, who's in Chesterfield? Hi, Steve.
Hello there, Alex. Yeah,
hello.
I was listening to your call about the lad who had ADHD and sorted himself out. And my wife said you ought to ring and let her know your story.
Oh, tell me.
Okay. My story is I left school at 15, no qualifications. Yeah, we're out at Steelworks up Pitts. I went into Steelworks. I later got a job as an HGV driver, got 2 children. And I was really, really depressed at the HGV driver's job after about 15 years there. I wanted to leave. I used to get up in the morning and think, hang my head. And so I went to... I had a look into how I could help myself, really. I went to the doctors, and he wanted to sign me off with depression and stress. I said that carried a stigma, and he said, well, what about fatigue? So he signed me off for a few weeks with fatigue just before Christmas. I've always been a sportsman, although you won't think it now when you see me, but I was always interested in physiotherapy. So I went to the university, local university, Sheffield, asked if I wanted to get onto a physiotherapy course, how I would do it. They told me I had to go to a college first, an access course. Went to the college. I didn't have any GCSEs, so I couldn't get on the access course. So first of all, I had to register to do GCSEs. And then I got on the access course. And then I applied to uni. There were 1,000 applicants, 100 people to be selected. I was one of those.
Yeah.
I went to university. I became a physiotherapist. Worked in the NHS and then started my own private practice.
Hey!
And I'm just coming up to my 70th birthday, and I retired a few years ago. Well, COVID retired me, really.
Well, that's really... I love that. What a great story.
But it's just about getting your head sorted out and having the support. I mean, I had 2 children at university at the time. My wife had a decent job. That was always good, and she supported me through 3 years of continuous studies. It was a full-time course, so there was no way I was going to be able to work at the same time. I did have the luxury of getting a bursary, though, Alex, that they don't get these days.
Right. I mean, this is the thing. Work takes up so much of your life, right, that you've got to enjoy your work, really, if you can. Whatever you do, whether you're collecting bins, presenting on radio, doing open heart surgery, you've got to love what you're doing because it sort of dominates your existence. And I think there should be an importance in making workplace fun. But the problem now with all these DEI officers is it's just horrible, I mean, not here. We don't have any of that nonsense in Talk Towers. Don't you worry about that. We have a grand old time. I love working here. But no, I just imagine in certain organisations it must be like, oh, God, I can't say this. I can't do that. I mean, blimmin' heck. Thank you for your call, Steve. Let's speak now to Tony, who's in Staffordshire. Hi, Tony.
Afternoon, Middle.
Hello.
There's a coincidence for you because I'm originally from Chesterfield.
Yeah.
Where the last bloke was from.
Yeah. And don't tell me you were a physiotherapist and you decided you wanted to become an HGV driver, because that would be awesome.
No, not quite. No, quite. I must be about the same age because I'm 71.
Oh, maybe you guys went to school together.
Well, that's what I say. It's a proper coincidence, isn't it?
Oh, do you know what? I feel like we should dial him back up and you can compare notes and see who you've got in common, because you're bound to be like, oh, I know Dorothy. Yeah, I dated her back in 1965. Anyway, I'm afraid he's not on the line anymore, so we can't play that game. What do you want to talk to me about, Tony?
Well, anyway, Duck, I left school at Lockheed at 15. Left school on a Friday, started work on a Monday. Apprentice in a garage. Because I couldn't manage the college work because I'm severely dyslexic.
Yeah.
With a memory retention problem. So I couldn't do the college work. So I ended up being just a time served apprentice. Do all the job, but it just wasn't written down on paper, you know. But I've always wanted to join the army. So at 20, after me apprenticeship, or nearly 21, I joined the army. Within 18 months of being in the army, I became a second in command of a section. Within 2 years, I was full section commander with my own section of 10 men. I then was sent to be a recruit training instructor at my local training establishment for the regiment, where I became a nuclear, chemical and biological warfare instructor.
Ooh, blimey.
And yeah, so what it is, you do what you can do, you know what I mean? Just because you're dyslexic.
Right.
And a memory
so on that, I mean, look, your story is really important, and thank you for your service. Can I just say, we don't say that enough to people who served in our armed forces. But the problem now, of course, we were talking about DEI earlier, the amount of DEI policies in the army, someone like you might not be allowed in anymore because you're the wrong skin colour. Certainly in the RAF, white fighter pilots were told, sorry, you're not going to have your job, you're not going to be promoted because we need to have more diversity. And then this is what's about workplaces being fun, when you've got all this free speech, you know, attacks on free speech and political correctness. I would imagine when it comes to army barracks that stuff has to be left outside the gates.
Well, yeah, it was, you know, but I mean, in my day, which was, I'm a 70s, 80s soldier, you was taken on ability, not education. Obviously, the higher you went, education was important, and that's why I didn't go any higher than a corporal. But you were taken on ability.
Right.
You know, it wasn't until I was 64 that I became officially dyslexic. I've always thought I've been dyslexic, but never officially diagnosed, because I worked as a Ministry of Defence civil servant for the last five years of my working life. And the quartermaster says, go and get yourself tested. We've got somebody that can test you on camp. So I went and got tested. And that's why I know I am dyslexic.
Oh. Well, Tony, thank you ever so much. It's really good. I love it when people phone in with their personal stories and we get to hear about real lives. It sort of really sort of personifies things, as we say in the industry, puts the human element into the story. So thank you to Tony, originally from Chesterfield as well. Right, now, before I go to break, this is your opportunity to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
There you go. That is set to be the gig of the decade, so they say. Good luck if you are entering the competition. Right, we're going to take a short break now. But before I go to break, I'm just going to tease what we're talking about after break. This is brilliant. Angela Rayner is having a little bit of trouble because the unions representing the staff in her particular department are kicking off about going back to the work in the workplace. And there she is trying to bring in a whole host of even more egregious, silly, stupid workers' rights legislation. Good luck, Andrew, and you find out no one wants to actually turn up and work for you. We're going to be discussing that after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Now, you know, they have that old adage of if you make your bed, you've got to sleep in it. Angela Rayner, I think, is about to get a proper brush with reality. She is the one who's rolling out all of these wonderful workplace entitlements, workers' rights. Oh, well, you can call in sick from day one if you decide you're a little bit sad that, I don't know, the phone going off triggers you, and various other egregious things that's essentially going to make employing anybody nigh on impossible. The civil servants in her own department are now planning to go on strike, all because they've been asked to work in the office 3 days a week. Civil servants are railing against what they describe rigid attendance policies. 3 days a week! That's it! 3 days a week is a rigid attendance policy. Anyway, here to discuss this and also the fact that on top of sitting under their slankets, enjoying the good life, so public sector wages are set to surge by £50 billion despite civil service cuts, is Elliot Wilson, writer and former House of Commons clerk. Elliot, let's start off with this attendance on Whitehall. Do you know, when it comes to certain jobs, if you're a freelancer, right, if you set up your own business and you want to do it from an office at the end of the garden, be my guest. That's your company. You get to decide how it operates. If you signed up for a job working for the government, essentially taking our money to deliver for this country, and normally a fairly decent pay packet with a decent pension and all the sorts of rights that you don't get when you're a freelancer, and you're told to go into the office 3 days a week, what on earth are you striking for?
Well, I think there is a point there. I mean, your employer, whether it's the civil service or anyone else, does have a right to tell you where the job is to be carried out. I mean, I think the thing is, we need not to sort of define this in terms of everybody has to do the same thing. I mean, the civil service is 500,000 people doing all sorts of jobs. There are some of those which cannot be done from home, clearly. There are some of those which might be better done from home or which might be better done in some kind of hybrid environment. But the fundamental basis should be the operational outcome. How is the job done best? Where is it done best? And how is it done most efficiently? And that has to take precedence over your personal circumstances, unless you've arranged something with your employer in a very specific way. But, I mean, when I was working in the House of Commons pre-COVID, you went into the office 5 days a week because that's what the job did.
Yeah.
And that's what the House of Commons was. You couldn't really persuade it to meet elsewhere. So I think we made a lot of contingencies for COVID and coped in some ways reasonably well, but they seem to have sunk into the culture as entitlements rather than contingencies or privileges. And as I say, your employer can tell you where your job is to be carried out, and that's their right to do.
I mean, you sort of said, there might be some jobs that benefit from being done from home. What sort of job in the civil service is better off done from home than sitting in a department where you actually have access to papers, secure computers, the colleagues that you have to negotiate with, access to the minister if they call into the department? I mean, what is the benefit of someone not being present on Whitehall but instead sitting on their sofa?
Well, I mean, if you're doing a long piece of policy work, I can see that perhaps you might benefit from saying, this is going to take me 2 days. I will be without distractions. I will do this from home and I'll produce it by Tuesday or whatever. I mean, it's all about operational need and how things function best. I do think you touch on a point, though, which is about the interchange with colleagues, because we've now got the emergence of a work culture where people are much more isolated from their colleagues than they were. And I think that is becoming a problem. I mean, I know colleagues who are still in the House of Commons who, for example, find it very difficult to organise team meetings because they can't find a time in the week when all of their team, if it's quite a big team, are in the office. And then you get people saying, well, I can't come in that day because, that's my day at home, or I can't come in that day because I've got other commitments or childcare commitments or whatever, some of which may be understandable. But if it's starting to affect the way that you and your team operate to do the job you're paid for, then I do think we need to look at that and say, that's the wrong priority.
I can't go in that day because that's my day at home. I mean, blimey, I worry for our country if that becomes a sudden reason why you can't work or go into the office because that's your day at home. Let's now talk about the fact that considering all these people have days at home, did you know there's a very good acronym for people who work Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays? Won't say it on air. Ofcom probably wouldn't like it. But given you've got a load of those Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays sitting at home in the civil service, you'd imagine that, oh, great, we're saving a load of money because these people aren't having to commute. Their energy bills on properties might be less. I don't know. But the government's pay bill for these people is now soaring by more than £50 billion per year by the end of the day. 50 billion a year. This is crazy. How come civil servants are now costing so much that the bill is soaring by £50 billion a year by the end of the decade?
I think the 50 billion is wider than just the civil service, it's public sector as a whole. And one of the issues is that for all the government talks about its 20 billion black hole in the finances, it came in and at a very early stage made a lot of relatively generous pay settlements with public sector workers. Now, you can argue whether they deserve those pay rises or not, but the government took that on its back and is now seeing the fact that, of course those rises are in some cases quite a bit above inflation. And so, yeah, you are going to have a much bigger bill because they took the view, rightly or wrongly, that to avoid industrial action, disruption, to restore morale in some of the public sectors, that they would make generous settlements. They would agree with some of the pay reviews. And now we're seeing that coming through. And people will find it difficult to understand that at a time when we're being told there is no money for anything, the cupboard is bare, the Chancellor might have to raise taxes again in the autumn. At the same time, there are these, treated separately almost, pay increases coming in, which are, as you say, 50 billion is a lot of money. I mean, it's the defence budget for a year.
Hey, Sir Keir Starmer's also said he wants to slash the flabby state, cut the civil service by up to 50,000 workers. One of the things he's abolishing is NHS England. I had a load of people on my show when that announcement was made saying, what is it they actually do? What does NHS England do? Nobody was able to answer me. So pretty glad they've gone. But apparently there are currently 4 million people employed by central government. That's, like you said, those are all public sector workers. That's your doctors, your teachers, etc., as well as civil servants. And that's going to rise by 330,000 over the rest of the 2020s. Right, we probably need more police and doctors and nurses and teachers. But the latest ONS figures also show there are 548,000 civil servants, so more than 500,000 civil servants, and that's gone up by 100,000 since the pandemic. Why have we suddenly got 100,000 more pen pushers, essentially? What are they doing?
It is quite difficult to understand why the civil service numbers are still so high. I mean, back in the mid-2010s, the number was about 350,000. The coalition government and the Conservatives cut it quite substantially. There was an argument that it had to go up, firstly, to deal with Brexit, which was obviously a degree of turbulence, and then also to deal with the COVID pandemic. But it seems to be stuck very high, and there seems to be very little ability to bring it down. I mean, I think anybody who thinks that we must have more than 500,000 civil servants, which is more than we've had for 20, 25 years, and that there is no scope for cutting any of those, is living in a different world. The problem is that the Prime Minister says these things, but there's no indication that he has any idea about how to reduce the numbers. And he also has this weird cognitive dissonance of, on the one hand saying we must cut regulation, we must, sort of get rid of the blockers and the people sort of standing in the way of progress. And at the same time, they're piloting the Employment Rights Bill through Parliament, which is essentially a very heavy regulatory burden for business.
I'd love to know, in comparison to other countries, how many civil servants they have, considering we've got 500,000 for a country of a population supposedly of around 68 million, or wherever we're at today. Forever moving figure, that one. Elliot Wilson, thank you ever so much, writer and former House of Commons clerk. I'm going to see if I can find that out during the advert break. If we've got 548,000 civil servants for our tiny little island, what do other countries have? It'd be interesting to find out. One imagines that that's going to be a rather eye-watering context. And, if you're a regular listener to my show, you know the things that I would get rid of straight away. That's why I've gone off devolved government. That seems to me to be about as useless as NHS England. Just run all health services from Westminster. Why do you need separate ones in Wales and in Scotland and all the bureaucrats that involves? I mean, Wales, you've only got 4 million people. Why do you need that big old government? You got MPs who are elected in Wales who go to the Houses of Parliament. Is life better with your blanket 20-mile-per-hour zones? Yeah, didn't think so. Wasting your money is what it's doing. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, I'm going to be talking to one of my favourites, Emma Kenny, who's a psychologist and a broadcaster. Amongst other things, we're going to be talking about the fact that things have got so gnarly now in Great Britain that Pampers have had to introduce to the marketplace jumbo-sized nappies because kids are now going to school and they're not even potty trained. I mean, what? We're discussing that after this.
Britain has got a very major growth problem. The headline numbers actually exaggerate what the real position is. Why do I say that? I say that because actually what matters isn't the headline number, is growth per head of population, the per capita.
And the population
growth
is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger by the year.
It is.
And not from birth, from boats and from visas.
Absolutely correct. So if you look at the last 5 years, per capita growth, per head growth has not increased at all.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Let's dive straight in to our final story today, which is the fact that Pampers is launching jumbo-sized nappies for school children who are not toilet trained. Apparently, kids should be able to fend for themselves between around 18 and 30 months. So by the time you get to 5 years old and you're going to school, you should know how to pull down your pants, sit on the toilet, pull them back up and go back to the classroom. What is going on? Let's speak to Emma Kenny, psychologist and broadcaster. Hello, Emma. What is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's multifaceted, isn't it? Because I was just thinking about all the contributing factors. Like, obviously, there's a group of people who have children with developmental issues. Understandably, that's great if they can get nappies that are available for their kids. But for the most part, it does feel like since COVID, there's just been this stratospheric change just on a social, environmental, social, educational level where kids are concerned. And I kind of think to myself, when I was a young mum, one of the things that I found really helpful was having peers around me who were going through very similar situations and stages. You know, you'd go for the coffee morning, you should go and hang out with other mums, and the older kids would be going through those changes and shifts, and you'd learn and pick that up. And then COVID just eradicated that possibility. That's another theme that's come into it. Then there's genuine parents who don't get to take care of the kids very often. Well, let's be honest, the amount of work that parents have to do now just to stay afloat in this economy means that they're putting kids in nurseries as if a nursery is going to be able to provide those developmental steps when they've got 30-odd kids to deal with. Then you've got laziness, and then you've got kids who are getting too big. Because the truth is, we're 10 times more obese now. Kids are 10 times bigger. And that means that they are also kids who might not be in school but are still needing this kind of nappy. So it's that whole collision of factors that have really led to this. And it's a bit devastating, to be honest. It really is.
One assumes as well, if you're 5 years old, I mean, look, I'm no psychologist, but you are, but you're starting to get a sense of, you know, socialising and being in peer groups and things like that. Are these kids not now going to get picked on top of it all because they still need a nappy?
It's absolutely bizarre to me that parents are willing to send their child in that situation to school, because absolutely anybody can reflect on being 5 years of age and feeling shame. It's one of those feelings that we experience. We can feel isolation, abandonment, a sense of being ostracised. So if you are dealing with the anxiety of that, that's going to contribute to those issues as well. The reality is you should have to have potty trained your child, got them toilet trained by the time they go to school. It's as simple as that. That was always the way it was, because there's also an expectation on teachers. They reckon that actually there's about a third of time being wasted in school right now in primary age on these kind of teachers having these distractions that they need to deal with. So that's time being taken away from educating the children that are there who have been adequately trained. So the big question is, why in our society now are we lacking the responsibility to some degree required as parents? Is it because we no longer have the option to rear our children personally? Is it because people are giving up and feeling helpless since what happened during COVID? Is it because the state is so overreaching into everybody's lives, everyone's looking at somebody else to do the work for them? Is it that, of course, obesity is playing in? Because it is. We have deplorable levels in the UK, and all of those things are very, very real. And charities have been screaming about this for ages. Basically, as soon as COVID ended, charities were saying, we've got a real problem here. but nobody's really done very much about it. And how you tackle that at 5, 6, 7 years of age is really challenging because, yeah, the kid's the victim. The kid's the victim, that's it.
You kind of think changing a nappy and then actually taking someone to a toilet and teaching them how to do it, it probably takes a similar amount of time. I don't understand how this is. Do you think part of it is also due to sort of, there's something in society now where, you know, if a kid goes, I don't want to, I want to wear a nappy, I'm scared, I can't do it by myself, that parents are more likely to go, oh, go on then, because they're worried about upsetting the kid. Do you think that comes into it?
We're certainly a very child-centric country. We are very concerned about the needs and welfare of our kids, and part of that could be overextended into just accommodating their needs more than necessarily they need them to be accommodated that's best for them. But I also do think that during that period of isolation where a lot of kids were kept away from their peers and parents didn't have the chance to interact, there was a level of helplessness that was formed and forged that has just rarely been seen in our experience. If ever. And I think that that is the collateral damage. But like I said, I really struggle with the fact that children are going to school in this situation and state. They're the people who suffer, because actually it's really embarrassing when 3 of your peers are able to go and do those things and you're not having attention drawn to your own issues with toilets, then you yourself feel very different. Like I said, you can understand the argument about having bigger nappies for developmentally challenged children. You can understand it for those who are toddlers who are much bigger because of obesity. But no, when it gets down to 4 or 5 years of age, you should absolutely have it nailed down. Failure as a parent, and you have to take responsibility for that.
I mean, you talked about the impact of COVID and it made people feel a lot more helpless, and it's interesting because, you know, a story in today's Times says a quarter of Britons are now disabled. 2 million more people than before the pandemic say they struggle to function because of poor mental health. 2 million people. That is an enormous amount. I mean, what's going on in society? Why is everybody just unable to cope now?
I think one of the big things for me is just that we absolutely overclassify. That's the reality as far as I'm concerned. I think that everyone finds that they want to belong to something. And when they're struggling to understand their own mental health, emotional health, one of the things that you can do is say, well, maybe there's something about me that fits into this classification that gives me a reason to understand why I'm not able to do and function in the way I wish to do and function. But actually, that means that we're giving away responsibility, accountability. And the problem with that is there's no self-power. If there's no self-power, you're not going to be able to change. Also, if you have a society that to some degree is so mentally sick because of all the problems that we've had in the past decades, from what we eat to what we do, to the lack of socialisation, to the breakdown of community, to the massive division in our society, these are all things that are very much the building blocks of what make us happy. Good food, good nutrition, good exercise, good community, feeling part of something wider and bigger than yourselves. People don't. They're stuck in their homes. They don't know what to do to change their position. So they go, okay, there's something broken fundamentally within me, as opposed to going, no, actually, there's probably not something broken fundamentally in me. It's the world I'm living in that needs to change, and actually advocating for that within our communities, because that would actually make a positive difference to them, their mental health, the community at large, and the future of the British population, which is something fundamentally right now we're all too PC to dare to talk about. And the consequences that are, we've never been more supported financially when it comes down to benefits. We've never had more opportunities, yet we've never been more unhappy and devastated in our mental health.
There's something about striving, there's something about achieving, there's something about having purpose in life, there's something about responsibility that actually is deeply rewarding. And I think that a huge part of what's gone on is this sort of culture of instant gratification that's led to all sorts of things: obesity, porn addiction, gambling addiction, anxiety, I want to work from home, lack of socialising, perhaps even kids still being in nappies at the age of 5 years old. Perhaps, Emma, at the end of the day, what we need to do is get off our phones, get back into the real world and toughen up, because it'll do us a heck of a lot of good.
Oh, without a doubt. To forge resilience, you have to see that you happen to the world doesn't happen to you. That's the definition of agency. And the way you do that is to recognise that you have infinite meaning. I genuinely think the self-esteem of people in the UK, we have kind of nation dysphoria, and, you know, on that massive level where we just despise ourselves. And we're constantly telling kids, you're not good enough, this isn't right, being British is terrible. You can't do that to a nation and not expect some internalised experience. What we need to be saying to individuals is every single one of you's got a fingerprint. Mother Nature didn't bestow you with that individual fingerprint to say, you're just like everybody else, be a homogenous group of labelled individuals. It was there to say, you are completely unique, you're a masterpiece in your own right, figure it out, know your skills and work on those, because you'll succeed. If we concentrated more on that, instead of just deriding everybody in the UK on the whole, then maybe mental health would improve. It seems like a simple formula.
Nation dysphoria. What a brilliant turn of phrase. I've written it down. I've even written down, you happen to the world doesn't happen to you. I think that's a lovely little mantra. I'm going to finish work in a couple of minutes and take that with me for the rest of the day, week, month, year, and maybe the rest of my life. Thank you to Emma Kenny. Here's Russell Quirk sitting in for Ian Collins today. Are you happening to the world today?
I don't know. I don't know where I sit. You tell me. Depends.
Well, you're going to be sitting here in the next hour, right?
I am. Well, for the next 3 hours, hopefully.
Next 3 hours, that's true.
Unless they call me out early.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I will be doing in the next